All right. Well, we're back, and it's another week, and it's a hell one. So we've got our favorite players again. We've got Steve and Craig back, and I'm going to start out with a reading from one of my favorite films, Network. It was either 1972 or 1974, 76, excuse me. You should definitely check it out. This is from later in the film, and it's the character Jensen addressing Howard Beale. You have meddled with the primal forces of nature, Mr. Beale, and I won't have it. Is that clear? You think you've merely stopped a business deal. That is not the case. The Arabs have taken billions of dollars out of this country, and now they must put it back. It is ebb and flow, tidal gravity. It is ecological balance. You are an old man who thinks in terms of nations and peoples. There are no nations. There are no peoples. There are no Russians. There are no Arabs. There are no third worlds. There is no West. There is only one holistic system of systems, one vast and immense, interwoven, interacting, multivariate, multinational dominion of dollars. Petrodollars, electrodollars, multi-dollars, Reichmarks, rins, rubles, pounds, and shekels. It is the international system of currency which determines the totality of life on this planet. That is the natural order of things today. That is the atomic and subatomic and galactic structure of things today, and you have meddled with the primal forces of nature, and you will atone. Am I getting through to you, Mr. Bill? You will get up on your little 21-inch screen and howl about America and democracy. There is no America. There is no democracy. There's only IBM and ITT and AT&T and DuPont, Dow, Union Carbide, and Exxon. Those are the nations of the world today. What do you think the Russians talk about in their councils of state? Karl Marx? They get out their linear programming charts, statistical decision theories, min-max solutions, and compute the price-cost probabilities of their transactions and investments just like we do. We no longer live in a world of nations and ideologies, Mr. Beale. The world is a collage of corporations inexorably determined by the immutable bylaws of business. The world is a business, Mr. Beale. It has been since man crawled out of the slime, and our children will live, Mr. Beale, to see that perfect world in which there's no war or famine, oppression or brutality, one vast and ecumenical holding company for whom all men will work to serve a common profit, in which all men will hold a share of stock, all necessities provided, all anxieties tranquilized, all boredom amused. And I have chosen you, Mr. Beale, to preach this evangel. To which Mr. Beale replies, "But why me?" Dan Jensen says, "Because you're in television, dummy. 60 million people watch you every night of the week, Monday through Friday." I thought that was an appropriate way to kind of roll us into this crazy hell week we're kind of experiencing. So how
I
are you
mean,
guys doing?
there's some truth in the statement, right? Like, at the
Oh,
end of the day, we
absolutely.
do have specific ways in which we calculate the path forward, right? And that's one of the things that tends to go missing in these debates is we have a whole bunch of people who say, "Yeah, we're not going to do that anymore." But the reality is that when you start talking to engineers and physical scientists and all the rest, it's not science is not as much a process as it is a pipeline, and each step in that pipeline is a refinement of the previous process, and each step is sitting there and introducing more factors and more variables to make actual physical decisions. And if we all follow that path, there are correct answers, but we haven't been doing that.
No, not really. So, shall we just begin by going over this fascinating week we've just had?
Let's start with 900,000 jobs lost in 3 days. Yay, Mr. President.
Yeah, we were
Just
told
as
We were told
This
it was
is up from
10,000,
6
but
hours in.
yeah, let's tear into those numbers a little.
Well, this is up from less than 6 hours in when he got rid of 60,000 jobs with a stroke of his fucking pen. Which
So
might be as
what
high
Greg
as
is talking
90,000
about
jobs
is the
soon.
Keystone Pipeline. Just so people know,
Yeah.
the one thing he eliminated with one stroke of his pen
The
was
funniest-
60,000 jobs.
The funniest fucking thing, and I can't believe they exist in principle just to begin with. And I feel bad for them at the same time, but you can't feel too bad because they fucking asked for it. Is the Democrat pipeline workers who voted for Biden, who must have missed the fucking memo where one of the things he said he was going to do day one was to revoke the goddamn permit. I don't know what possessed them to think that maybe they're immune from that, but they weren't.
Well, if I remember correctly, right, a significant number of the mail-in voters, after the second televised debate, turned around and started researching how it is that they changed their vote. Because the first debate was a shit show. Like, I think we can all say that Trump fucked up. I think he walked into that thinking that Biden was incompetent,
He was very
and Biden
quiet.
was given all of the medical drugs that we have in our society to keep him competent. He took all the drugs.
The thing is, so Biden must have just, I don't know, had a whole ton of bubble gum that day, because the man is incontinent. He can't, that's the reason why he doesn't do the debates and shit, is because he can't stand there for more than 2 minutes without having problems.
And I think when Trump went into the first debate, he thought that Biden was just going to be that incompetent old fool that he sees in all the other speeches. But he didn't realize that American doctors are pretty good with their drugs, and they can make an incompetent old motherfucker look like he actually can, stand straight and speak a sentence if they pump enough methamphetamine into him.
Let's be realistic. All they really had to do was give him a couple of meth tabs and then strap a big ass diaper on him.
That's exactly right.
Probably that. They might have given him a couple of, hair implants in the nose so they'd have something, nostalgic to sniff as well.
The scent of sweet, sweet little girl attached to Biden's nostrils. But, I mean, ultimately,
That's
I think when we start talking about the first debate, most people hadn't cast their votes. Trump screwed that up. And Trump needs to own the fact that he walked in underestimating his opponent and medical doctors. After the second debate, they started taking polls and they started looking at Google data, and Trump just scorched Biden in his second debate. And the data that we were getting from Google was, how do I change my vote? How do I do these things? Because Trump started pinning Biden on things like the Keystone XL pipeline.
I gotta bring something up here when it comes to modern medicine. Have you noticed that Biden's broken foot lasted less time than Trump's COVID infection?
I'm telling you what, we have some of the best doctors.
That is just spectacular work.
What we can do with broken bones now. I thought being able to save being able to save that that person who got shot in the head for every town or whatever, Mark Kelly's wife, Kathy Giffords. Yeah.
Oh, the Congress critter.
I thought it was legitimately impressive that they were able to save her life considering the amount of damage done. But, I mean, I guess medicine's just gotten that much farther along.
Well, medicine's actually pretty impressive. Realistically speaking, we talked a little bit last episode about bioethics and how bioethics is probably one of the most interesting aspects of the field. I mean, realistically, if you wanted to talk about what our technology can do now, if you wanted to live forever, we could probably pull it off. All we have to do is take a little bit of DNA from you, clone the cell, grow the cell in a vat, and then do a brain transplant. And those are the kinds of things that we can do now and today. Now, whether murdering entire mini people that you create solely for the existence of you to feed off of is appropriate is a separate moral question.
Not to be asked in China. Because it's, fine.
No. That's a great question to ask in China because they already have the answer.
Well, yeah.
As long as American dollars flow in, they're good with it.
Yeah, so if you're looking for cutting edge, horrifying scientific medical treatments, you know, maybe you should look into booking a room in Xinjiang. I
I
hear they've got
mean,
some very nice hotels there.
if you're interested in cutting edge, national grid type treatments, that's a pretty good place to look too, because Biden has now officially allowed one of the original Trump executive orders was to repeal China's access to our grid system, and Biden repealed that in the last week because why not?
Well, it is important that, a near peer competitor be able to access our infrastructure and own it. You know.
That's exactly correct. But yeah, I'm very excited that Biden has successfully managed to kill 1 million jobs in less than 3 days.
Now let's break that
That
down
is
too, because the initial reporting is there's a 60,000 jobs on the pipeline directly. But of course, we've got the knockdown effect too. We've got all your inspectors, we've got all your maintenance people, we've got
A lot
all
of
the
linesmen,
stuff
yeah.
they get done.
They,
So, kind of break that down for us a little, if you don't mind.
so first you got your core group, right? And these are going to be the engineers that are building the pipeline, making sure each piece mates up to another piece appropriately. They're going to be issuing the design and the drawings in each individual state. Then you're
you got
going
all
to
the
have your actual
working underneath
right.
them. Yeah.
There's technicians working underneath them. There's going to be your logistics crew. So when we start talking about 60,000 jobs, you get that number pretty quick because this is not a small project, right? This is pretty close to a wonder of the world level effort.
This is the new wall of China that's going up.
This really is, right? So this is something that goes from
Not
Canada.
as splendorous, but it is gonna, it's big.
Yeah, and so when you start talking about it, it's a whole lot of people that had work for the next probably 5 to 10 years.
Oh yeah.
Plus you know, even once that's done, right, they're gonna actually have all the separate pipelines that spawn off of that, or the additional QA/QC work associated with it, because pipelines aren't like a lot of people think we build a pipeline and we walk away from it, but that couldn't be further from the truth. Right? We constantly are testing these things. I see people sit there and say, oh my God, what happens, what happens if it leaks? There are literally, that costs money, right? A leak costs money. And I'm not just talking about in terms of environmental damage.
It costs a hell of a lot more money for a leak to happen than to prevent a leak to happen.
That's exactly right. So they
orders of magnitude.
They pay dozens or hundreds of QC people in a short length of pipeline to go up and down that every day with a variety of advanced instrumentation. So by the time you start talking about the downstream effects of the let's ban the Keystone Pipeline, it probably comes up around 60, 70,000 people. I mean, we won't actually ever know because there's a whole bunch of other industry jobs that are not directly tied to the pipeline that are indirectly tied to it.
Let's also consider all the jobs that, until the license may or may not come back. And we know that the oil is still going to be transited. So in a fit of irony here, all Biden's really done is make it cost, in the grand scheme of things, if you're thinking that in this terms of this metric, it will now cost more CO2 to transit the oil from Canada down to the U.S. than it would go through a pipipeline. Because they're going to have to either truck it or put it on a train.
And that's the kind of stuff that we talked about last weekend.
Right.
Ultimately, the reality is that Biden's sitting there and saying, well, the environmental groups have told me that if I ban this thing, it'll stay in the ground. There's no fucking way that Canada is going to say, yep, we're okay with sitting there and losing all of that economic revenue for the future.
So the other jobs you have to think about here are, you also have to think about the jobs that were going to be created pending that until that legislation was pushed through on the EO, because EOs are legislation in a sense. They are just kind of pocket bills, if you will. Anyway, until Mr. Pen and Telephone Part 2 came through and said that there are going to be plenty of these ancillary jobs that were going to show up in the next 10 years or so, involving this pipeline. It wasn't just like the inspectors and whatnot. You also have people who are going to have to come up with the repairs that are necessary. You have to have inspection teams that are going to be rotated in and out. They might not be working in the same area. I actually know some oil field workers, and they get rotated around the country.
Yep.
So they're going to have to expand the pool of people.
And when we start talking about these jobs, these are like, I mean, so I work in the nuke industry. I've mentioned that a couple times. But at the end of the day, there are two real major powerhouses of engineering and infrastructure, and that is fossil fuels and nuclear. Both of them pay their people extremely well to sit there and keep this stuff running. And all of that is stuff that was a major pipeline. That was going to power the refineries. That was going to power the downstream. That was going to power the upstream. All of it.
Imagine this. Like, we already had, until relatively recently, we already had energy independence. So we were a net exporter as the United States alone, let alone Canada being involved.
Mm-hmm.
So Canada sending their oil down to the U.S. to be refined, and then as a continent, North America, we would be a very strong net exporter. We'd be exporting plenty of oil and refined products around the world, as it was. So, like, you just consider that these downstream economic fall-offs. Biden's taken away the pipeline itself, thereby basically increasing the overall CO2 output that's going to come about this. And at least the short term has made the U.S. We're going to end up not being a net exporter rather shortly. So the energy independence is now going to go away.
Well, the great irony here, right? Like, if we talk about holistically, one of the things that we actually got recognized for is, even under Trump having left the Paris Accord, we are one of the only nations that have met our CO2 reductions.
No, we didn't just meet them; we blew past them.
Yeah, we blew past them. Now, a large portion of that
and
has
the UN
to do
has
with
recognized
energy
that
independence.
recently.
Yep.
The UN's recognized that recently, and the major reason for that is the shale gas.
Mm-hmm.
Because it burns way cleaner, and you don't have to put it through a cracking tower before you make plastic out of it.
That's exactly right.
Which, by the way, is the major product of the oil industry. It's plastic. Plastic and specialty chemicals. That would be the petrochem part of it. Like all those pharmaceuticals you take, all the specialty chemicals that make a lot of the stuff around you work.
Everything you should consider.
Most of that comes from oil. Gas is a loss
most of
leader.
your oil and gas, the stuff that we're actually burning for energy, is the stuff that it costs more to sit there and turn it into a more valuable product. It's not that it's the only thing out there. We burn all this stuff for energy. We talk about these as energy companies, but they're really plastics companies. They're all of this other,
or they're pharmaceuticals. You know, they're API precursors. You know, it's active pharmaceutical ingredient.
They are chemical feedstocks that are critical. Absolutely critical.
In fact, if we could, this is one of the reasons why renewables and nuclear are a major source of interest for these oil companies. When you sit there and think, why the hell would they want to invest in these other alternative energy sources? It's because they're currently burning their product.
Yep.
Like the gasoline is a loss leader. If you factor in transport, it's a loss leader. And everything else that comes out of it is a better profit objective than is to pull out gasoline.
Oh yeah, just look at the price of oil per gallon right now.
All it requires is a catalyst agent and sitting there running a specific set of reformation reactions. Which, by the way, we can take natural gas out of the actual ground, and if we run it through these reactors, it comes out to be profitable about $20 per barrel for oil. So anything greater than $20 per barrel of oil is profitable to run, a variety of upchain reactions, such that they actually produce more useful products that are not simply burnt.
Yeah, so it's nuts. The idea, and I love the part where Biden tried to backtrack, and it was the second debate, I guess. Tried to backtrack on the idea that he was gonna shut down the oil industry. Just sitting there thinking, you already said what you meant the one time, pal, and everybody knows that. The same way that well, I'm gonna leave that on the table with the whole voter fraud thing because I'm not gonna open up that rat's nest again.
Yeah, we don't need to get banned either for
talking
talking
about. Raquel
about.
Rodriguez is definitely a fucking rat, and I hope she rots in a cell.
Who's that?
The woman in Texas that got arrested.
Oh yeah, for doing a crime.
I was just lying. They wanted a proposal, so I spun bullshit. Definitely bullshit. The most bullshit of all that was the fact that you said you're lying.
Oh, speaking of bullshit, this one actually just recently came out from Dr. Burks, if you remember her.
Oh
She
yeah.
said, I saw the president presenting graphs that I never made. I know
So
that
here's the thing.
someone, somewhere
That,
out there, or someone inside,
that
was
is very
creating a.
carefully phrased.
Hmm?
Yeah, it's very carefully phrased. You noticed.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
indeed it is. Yeah, let me finish the quote here. Someone outside, someone out there, or someone inside was creating a parallel set of data and graphics that were shown to the president. I know what I sent. What was in his hands was different.
So what's very carefully phrased about that is that she didn't say that it was her, that these other sets of data were attributed to her. She technically did not lie. She just implied heavily that the president was being shown things that had her name on them, even though she didn't say that. So later on, it's going to come out where, whoa, you said that the president saw something with her name on it. She's going to say, oh, I never said that.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also this recent piece on what it was like for Fauci working under Trump, and the implication is that everything that happened to Fauci was because of Trump. But all they really do is focus on the fact that he and his kids and his wife, and this is really lamentable, got death threats and abuse, and directly to his kids' phones.
Oh, kind
That
of like.
shit's just totally unacceptable.
Yeah, exactly.
But
What
the,
happened
the,
to
the
the
implication there is that
CEO
it's
of
because of
Parler?
Trump. It just wasn't.
Yeah.
No, it really wasn't. The bottom line is, and when we sit there, we debate a lot of subjects. One of the things that we talk about, we don't really dive into, is the masks, because Craig and I can literally go back and forth for hours on that. The bottom line is that you start talking about things like what Fauci did. Fauci turned around and would make a statement, and then he'd face 3 weeks plus of the New York Times and various other media outlets criticizing his decision with no basis, right? No basis other than what he said. Like, he could make an actual viable statement, and they would criticize him for 3 weeks, and then they'd eventually retract it because it's just easier than dealing with the press.
Well, I mean, kind of in a very similar vein as the hydroxychloroquine thing. It's
Mm-hmm.
Well, you'll
only
notice that's
finally.
gone completely out of the news.
Yeah, yeah. Now that it's quietly just, oh yeah, no, that works. That works really well. Works fine. Totally. Go ahead on early stage patients. But never minding
Is that where it is right now?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, it's not being pushed because vaccines are the greatest thing that ever happened in the history of ever forever, and everyone should take one because they're the best, and they're just the best, and they're the best.
Yeah, no, I
Well,
mean,
if you want to go back to the days of measles, feel free to move up to Michigan and keep it away from the rest of the U.S. Go
Oh,
join
speaking
the.
of Michigan, I
I
hear
think
that
there's a
they're finally
fundamental
going to be opening
difference.
places up now.
I think there's a fundamental difference between vaccines associated with the MMR and some of these other things that are standard childhood vaccinations, and they're standard childhood vaccinations because they have 40 to 60 years worth of research proving that they work.
Kind of like
right?
the MMR.
Well,
As opposed to the current COVID stuff.
Sure, you could
which,
you could make that claim about mRNA, and I'll be right there with you to say that is true. There's
Right.
not nearly as much research behind them.
But
I would also say
even
they're more thoroughly tested.
even besides that, the difference between MMR vaccines and your mRNA stuff right now today that we're talking about is the MMR means that you won't get measles. You're not going to get your mumps, and there's no rubella coming into your system.
The same as now.
We start talking about these mRNA vaccines, and they're saying, yeah, you still need to wear masks.
Yeah, you know why, right? It's not because you're going to get sick. It's not. It's because you can still transmit it.
But that's not the case with the MMR vaccine.
No,
that's not an issue. Right?
It literally is. It's the same exact issue. The main reason why getting the MMR vaccine, you don't have to worry about getting measles, like the transmission issue, is because everyone else is already vaccinated. It's a herd immunity issue. It's not like the virus is not going to be able to propagate past, say, 2 people that are vaccinated, maybe 3 people that are vaccinated. But if you don't have enough people so that you're able to have that many different bounce connections that are definitely vaccinated, you're not going to be able to hit herd immunity.
Hold on. The problem is that even if you get vaccinated, right, you still have to do everything. Even if you had a collective of people that were vaccinated, you still have to do everything.
If you had 100%,
you have to do everything. If it's not changing anything, then it's not really a cure for the problem.
It's because you don't have herd immunity yet. You personally will be protected and you'll be fine. But if you go out there and you just do whatever, and then you go and you hang out with all your unvaccinated friends, you can still transmit the virus to them. And it sucks, but that's just the reality of the situation.
Except that's not, again, that's not really how the MMR stuff works.
It literally is.
But it's not, though, right? Like,
no, it literally is. Everybody's already... Look, if you went back there in time and you said, how are we going to introduce this thing? They would say everyone has to be vaccinated before it'll be effective.
I don't know. The problem that we're having in California... That's the way vaccines work. The problem that we're having in California is that the people who are not getting vaccinated, it's not that they're not transmitting it, it's that they're actually susceptible to it. Whereas in this case, when we're starting to talk about this, we have to do absolutely everything. Nothing changes if you have the vaccine. That is a problem.
Except you can't get the disease anymore.
No, you still can. You can still get it. You can still transmit it.
This is true of every single vaccine. Everything you're complaining about is true of every single vaccine. I
have not seen that with the MMRs, the
That's
TB
because everybody already has it. Everybody already has them. That's why.
No, nobody has TB vaccines. When I took them as an EMT, right? We take the vaccine for TB, right? And the whole thing.
Why is it that you don't need to have a TB vaccine for the most part in the United States?
It's not really a big issue here.
Oh,
it doesn't really transmit here.
Go.
Yeah, but that's not herd immunity, dude. That's not herd immunity. If the majority of people don't have the vaccine, it's not herd immunity.
Well, it's because of herd immunity.
Right. Sure.
It is. No, there's two factors here. One, it generally speaking isn't here. Two, people get tested for it.
No, they only get tested for it in certain fields.
Every single child gets the pinprick on the arm.
No, they don't.
Yes, you do.
No, I didn't get the pinprick in the arm until I was an EMT. That was when I had to actually have documented. As soon as you are a health worker,
everybody I know in Florida does. Everybody in Florida gets it. I'll give you that one at least.
Really?
I know it's a thing in Florida.
Really?
Everybody gets the pinprick.
Yeah, not an issue in Mass, not an issue in New York. The only time I ever dealt with it was...
Maybe it's a tropical thing or whatever. Or maybe, we also have like all those Cubans that come over and blah, blah, blah. So maybe there's that. My guess is you might see the same kind of thing in Texas border towns at least.
It looks like it is actually kind of a thing as I'm just checking it out. It looks like that's something that's done with a fair degree of frequency.
It's very common. It's almost every single child in Florida will get it.
TB tests are common in Florida?
Just like almost every single child. It's part of.
I'm seeing it is in California, at least as far as you can't get your kid into school without a TB test.
I mean that may be.
I mean that makes sense, obviously.
That's what I mean.
It's California, but still.
Well, they do that. That's the rule in Florida too.
Don't forget though, California also has a lot of other problems with the fact that they're pretty much like ground zero for the anti-vax community. And again, I am not anti-vax in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, we should make that very clear.
I am just suspicious of an mRNA vaccine that has had a fraction of the standard safety trials. And, by the way, at the end of the day, you still have to do everything and nothing changes.
Right. Two things. One, we need to make it very clear, and I'm as pro-vax as I am, I need to make this doubly clear. Steve is not anti-vax. He raises very reasonable questions, and we may or may not see eye to eye on all of the outcomes of our discussions on them, but he's very much pro-vaccine. In that sense,
very much.
But he has a healthy degree of skepticism about the novel technologies being deployed in this particular case because the mRNA vaccines are very.
Well,
very
it isn't
new.
even a vaccine; it's a gene therapy. If we're being
well, no, it's a
that's a
hold on,
separate issue.
whoa,
Separate issue.
stop right there because Two things. One, it's not a gene therapy because it's not changing your genes.
It's not, but I mean that's
It's
the
not.
nearest.
It literally fucking isn't.
It is borderline gene therapy.
No.
Yes,
no.
if you are
Absolutely
injecting
not.
DNA into your cells,
Okay,
and
I gotta
those
stop
cells
you
are
there.
then going to replicate a protein for you, it is borderline gene therapy.
You know what else happens?
No,
let me stop you there.
It is not changing the fundamental DNA
I
of
gotta
your
fucking
cells,
stop you.
but it is still borderline.
What happens when you get it?
gene
No,
therapy.
there's two things. Like I said, two things I gotta correct. One, it's not a gene therapy, and I'm gonna get into that in a second. Two, it is a vaccine. Because what does a vaccine do? It generates an immune response, and that's the definition of it. Period. Two, talking about injecting genetic material. You're talking about injecting genetic material. What the fuck do you think a deactivated virus is?
Oh, it's a whole bunch of
it's a whole bunch of genetic material, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Fuck you. I'm right.
But at the same
doesn't
time,
change.
hold on. That injection is a series of proteins that have already been replicated.
No, they're not.
Yes, it is.
A deactivated virus.
You take a chicken egg, you inject the DNA into the chicken egg, it has produced the virus, then you sit there and you typically sit there and radiate the virus.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, it's been broken down into its constituent proteins.
No, it hasn't.
You are not fundamentally manufacturing the proteins on your own via your own cells.
All right. So the point here being that if you're gonna be a dick, at least be specific. All right. So to get on to what it actually does in your body and why it's definitely not changing you fundamentally.
That's true.
All it does
is not changing you fundamentally, but it is borderline gene therapy.
It is messenger DNA, and all messenger DNA does when it gets into a cell, which is where it by the way, messenger DNA floats around in your bloodstream by itself already. It's an endogenous process. It's already a normal thing for that. If you remember prion disease, the mad cow shit, or Crutchfield-Jacob, those are diseases when the mRNA in a person misfolds and then causes some gunk to show up in your synapses. So mRNA is already everywhere. When they add it into your body, mRNA doesn't go around replicating and turning into more mRNA. All it does is generate protein as long as it's near the ribosome and as long as it's getting clamped in and read through. It generates protein that goes into the protein folding enzyme and then gets turned into enzymes or proteins that go around and do things.
I think that we need to clarify that Crutchfield-Jacob is not necessarily an mRNA like
prions.
It has
are mRNA in the bloodstream.
The prion stuff is very interesting because it's questionable whether it actually exists. Right? That is another fundamental thing that by the time we start talking about our digestive tract, throwing all the wonderful magic of a few billion years of evolution it is not mRNA anymore.
If you're talking about whether or not eating mad cow infected, for lack of better words, meat is going to give you Crutchfield-Jacob,
that's true.
If you're talking about the digestive process allowing that shit to happen, yeah, that's questionable. If you're talking about just the fact that you can have the same physiological process cause problems and plaques in your brain, that is definitely true.
But ultimately,
so
again,
whether or not it comes from
how it
mad
gets
cow,
there, right? Like,
that is. I'm totally with you on that one. I don't believe that.
Whether it's mad cow or you're just a crazy motherfucker.
Like you'd have to, in my opinion, you'd have to do something stupid like inject mad cow blood into you, and even then, that would just cause agulation and death.
Right, exactly. Right, so we start talking about mad cow before we start sitting there and using that as an example.
I'm just pointing out that mRNA
that has like 30 plus caveats to even make it feasibly possible.
The point wasn't that these are
probably just a vegan attack on the meat industry.
So the point wasn't that one implies the other. The point was that the two in isolation exist as diseases in humans and cows. No connection needed for that. And again, caused by mRNA misfoldings that cause problems. So here's the way it works. Once the mRNA gets inside you, because there's no DNA producing more of it, that is all of that strand of mRNA that will ever exist in your body. And
all of that is true.
And here's what happens. It goes into your cells, goes to the ribosome, gets clamped in with the enzyme and the coenzyme, and it spits out a protein, and as long as another ribosome is right there ready to grab it, it'll continue doing that. But when it's not right there and ready to grab it, there's a couple other processes that come in,
It decays
and they will
very,
take
very quickly.
They will take the RNA, mulch it up into its base parts, and it'll be shat out of you. So you're never going to produce more of that strand of mRNA than is put in.
All of that is true.
Now let me pause the both of you actually for a quick second, to hop in here and actually say something that is related but is different, because there are going to be people out there. I know one personally that they think that this thing, it's going to go in there, it's going to reprogram your cells, and it's going to make you more able to be genetically modified in the future.
So here's the thing.
And does not do that. I just want that to be out there. Should
look,
it does not. No.
Should my friend on the other nearby on this flat plane of Earth on which we live.
The appropriate level of skepticism is it hasn't properly passed a normal level of safety trials.
But here's the thing.
The safety trials that it has passed are from an industry that has the highest replication rate failure of any other industry. And by the way, they're saying nothing changes between you having the vaccine and not having the vaccine.
But they're not.
They are.
No,
you know what?
Literally, look,
when
if you're talking about
turn
behavior,
around,
fine. But when you're talking about whether or not you can get the goddamn disease, they're not saying that.
No, they are. They're saying that you can still get the disease. It just might be less severe.
It's true of every fucking virus. I'm telling you.
No.
Yes, it is. It's true of every goddamn vaccine. If you have, look, it is a function of viral load. I know you're smart enough to know this.
Yeah, absolutely. But again,
if you get enough of the virus in
MMR,
no, stop it. No. Because
MMR is absolutely a perfectly good, relevant case because we have an actual
you can talk about it, but it's
going
to be the same thing.
I kind of
we have a population. We have a population of anti-vaxxers, right?
And they have a massive problem with measles.
They only within the anti-vax community. The rest of the population doesn't give a shit.
Because the rest of the population doesn't touch them. You notice that too?
No, it still does. The problem with anti-vaxxers is not necessarily within the vaccinated community. The vaccinated community is considered protected.
Do you want to get into the weeds on this one? Because I'm going to nail you on this one again.
You want to talk about the bee's knees? The bee's knees is that little infants who don't have the mother's immune system overcompensating for theirs because they haven't really adopted it yet are vulnerable. So the issue associated with the MMR vaccine and people who don't take it has not to do with the people who are not taking the MMR or who are taking the MMR vaccine. It has to do with the people who are too young to take the MMR vaccine.
And you know what the major problem is? Because otherwise they just tell people to keep their kids home. You know what the major problem with that is? The parents can transmit the fucking virus to their kids. They can.
Yes, they can.
It's a function of viral load, whether or not you get the disease.
Not the vaccinated parents. This is the anti-vaxxer parents and the anti-vaxxer kids.
Vaccinated parents can absolutely transmit the virus.
No.
It's a function of viral load.
The fundamental concern. The fundamental concern is the
that
population
anybody
that is
can transmit it to the baby.
That is not properly vaccinated, transmitting it to people who are too young to receive the vaccination.
Again, all right. So here, let me just go ahead and get into the weeds on this one because you're bringing it up. With MMR, if you're talking about measles, measles has to get to your lymphatic system to start causing the havoc that it causes. And the way it works is if you're going to get another infection and actually present with the disease after getting the virus into your body, you have to have enough of a viral load that is statistically possible for one of the viruses to get into a cell and replicate, and then produce more viruses. And this has to outstrip the trillions of antibodies your body produces. So you have to have a significant viral load for you to be able to get the disease associated with a virus.
You still won't get it once you're vaccinated.
This is literally the way it works.
There are a certain
and the fact is that you have to get. The fact is that the measles virus has to make its way to your lymphatic system to start causing the disease.
The predominant concern associated with unvaccinated communities is not necessarily the fact that we have a problem with vaccinated children catching the disease, because that's not where we're seeing it.
No shit.
We are seeing it rampaging through communities of the people who are vaccinated. So basically, the people who aren't rampaging through the communities of people who aren't vaccinated. Sorry, yeah, I'm a little bit drunk. My apologies.
I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt on this.
The bottom line is, it is rampaging through the people who aren't vaccinated. What we are saying right here with the mRNA vaccines is the mRNA vaccines do not protect you against the virus.
No, you're wrong.
They might make it less severe.
I'm telling you, no, like you're fundamentally incorrect on this.
The bottom line is, if you turn around and you said, hey, guess what? You get to take this vaccine. There are no health risks associated with it. And all of a sudden you get to stop wearing masks and doing all this other stupid shit, right? There would be a whole bunch of people lining up behind it. But that's not what they're saying. They're saying you can still get it. You can still get sick, and you can still transmit it. And, oh yeah, by the way, we're not entirely sure that it actually works. No, fuck you and all of your little vaccine shit, because the MMR vaccine is like 90-something% effective, and we know it's 90% effective because we have 20-plus years of research into proving that it's 90-plus% effective.
Right.
And the only time you sit there and find anything that's negative on the MMR vaccines is the fucking crazy-ass motherfuckers who are coming out of the woodwork, and talking about holistic medicine. Like, that is the only motherfuckers who are sitting there and saying anything negative about this. In this case, they're saying it doesn't do you any good. It doesn't change anything around you. Nothing in the world actually changes between you taking it and not taking it. And, oh yeah, you can still get sick. But, hey, maybe it'll have a slightly lower response. Fuck all of you.
Look, I'm telling you, it's fundamentally incorrect.
That is literally what they're saying.
No, it's literally not. I mean, do I need to go and like interview people and just come back and say like, hey, such and such said?
I mean, what are you gonna do, right? Like, at the end of the day, that's what they are legitimately saying, that you don't get to stop wearing masks. You don't get to sit there and stop social distancing.
Reasons for these things that are critical in the understanding of it.
You can still get sick. You can still transmit it.
Look, when they say these things, they can't. They can't say.
It would be true of the MMR if the MMR were in a situation where COVID is the thing.
I disagree with that. I disagree with that. Because the MMR stuff, the concern with the MMR is not of the people who have been inoculated with MMR. That is not the concern.
If there was a high enough chance of getting a high enough viral load to give them the disease, it absolutely would be a risk.
The concern is not with those people. The people who have received the MMR vaccine are generally
I got to bring up something for you then. If you deal with somebody in a quarantine room, and I have before, and you have to wear a mask going in, and it has been a measles person I've been around before. You know
Were
what
they
you're
vaccinated?
No.
Then it doesn't count!
But you know who was? Me. And you know who had to wear the fucking mask?
Why did you have to wear it, though? Right? Like,
because I could transmit the virus to somebody else. They already had the virus.
So you could transmit you as an individual, if
vaccinated,
you go in, you as a vaccinated individual, right?
Could attain a high enough viral load.
I am sure that you had more infection protocols than a mask.
Now, admittedly here, and this is important.
Did you not have more infection protocols than a mask?
Two things. One, yes.
Answer, this is a yes or no question.
There's an important difference here. There's an important distinction to make here, and this is the reason why they can't just tell you that it will keep you. Excuse me. That it will keep you from getting the virus or the disease. The fact of the matter is that I would have had to do more than just stand inside the same room to acquire a high enough viral load to plausibly transmit the virus to somebody else.
Well, I mean, ultimately, isn't that really what we're talking about with COVID? How many COVID patients are donating directly their DNA from one COVID patient to another?
Point being here, this person's already symptomatic, viral shedding, etc. I would have had to do more than just stand in the corner on the other side of the room, waiting for the other person to do whatever it was they needed to do while I stood there and held a couple of bed sheets. All right? So when it comes, obviously other things that were taken into account here: wearing gloves, washing your hands, scrubbing down, etc.
I'm assuming your actual garb was changed and everything else, right?
I had you wore the apron on the front.
Yeah, but I mean that's considered an
I was on
infection
the other
control measure.
And again, I was on the other side of the room, away from the person. I would have had to do more to acquire a high enough viral load to do something that would overcome the vaccine in any capacity. There's two limits here you should think about. There's the lower limit, whereby the virus is just exceeding the capacity of your body to attach enough antibodies to deactivate every single virus particle that comes in. After that point, you're going to start to acquire a viral load which is still active. Even if it's virtually none. Even if it's virtually none.
I understand.
And then after a point, it's going to start to be able to infect cells.
I understand there's always going to be some
people
who are not appropriately protected. However, again, for the most part, when we start talking about the MMR, the concern with MMR is the unvaccinated people transmitting it to other unvaccinated people.
Listen, you're confusing a couple things here. You're confusing something very important. You cannot come out as a hospital, a company that's providing a vaccine, whatever, and say this is guaranteed to protect you. You just can't do it. You will get sued immediately.
That's not an issue with the MMR stuff. Again,
yes, it is. It absolutely is.
The MMR concern is people who are unvaccinated transmitting it to people who can't be vaccinated. Right? That is the concern with MMR.
I'm telling you, with a high enough,
I wouldn't say that's one of the key concerns. I would just say that's a tertiary concern, in all honesty.
I mean that's the primary concern. Again, especially when we start talking about hospitals,
it's not prevalent enough for the other things to be there.
Talking about schools,
it's not. It's fun. It's just not a. There's enough people that are vaccinated, and there's a few enough number of people who cannot be vaccinated and have not been vaccinated, that the primary issue is the unvaccinated people.
And that's just basically by weight of...
That's called herd immunity, man.
Yeah, no, I get what herd immunity is, but the issue is...
My point here is that you're complaining about...
This is like the after effects of herd immunity. This is what herd immunity accomplishes.
The difference between an apple and an orange, and I'm telling you
not really.
Right? Yeah, really. So we had not hit herd immunity at all. There's no herd immunity in the US.
When we start talking about California, right? Let's talk about California for a
moment. There's no COVID herd immunity in California.
I don't give a shit about COVID. Let's talk. We're going to stick to
that's what you're trying to compare it with. And I'm telling you why you're not great to compare the two.
I'm talking about other vaccines that we do use, and we do use repeatedly. When we start talking about places like California, one of the things that they considered. No, the flu doesn't.
Oh, no, that's another one. No, that's another one. That's another fun one.
Let's talk about the MMR and where they were actually starting to possibly put in rules because they had high enough anti-vax communities that they were having problems. We were resurrecting diseases in places like California because
admittedly,
all
not
of the
all of them were
hippies
vaccinatable.
Decided that they didn't want to be vaccinated because Big Pharma was out to get them or something.
Here's the fun thing you have to admit on that one too is not all of them could be vaccinated. Like cholera. You don't get really a cholera vaccine or
yeah, but I mean that is true.
How many other of those medieval diseases came back?
Did bring back a whole bunch.
They brought back the fucking plague, man.
They did. Although to be fair, the plague actually kind of exists as a resident population associated with the Western.
There's 10 cases a year in the U.S.
But most of that does come. I mean, for the most part, for the folks who don't know,
plague, it comes from people living next to trash.
Yes, plague predominantly is transmitted between rodents and a variety of other species, which are generally immune to it. And it kind of exists in the Midwest, along with a variety of other diseases that actually exist kind of in the Midwest.
Usually it's like a hobo living next to a silo or something.
Right, exactly. So it's very rare transmission.
But then it happened in California like a lot.
somehow resurrected all of these
things. They have like, what, a couple hundred cases all of a sudden?
Yeah, all of a sudden. So California is special. But when we talk about MMR, right, and I want to stick to MMR because MMR is one of the things that is kind of a standard vaccine. Yeah, okay. The problem in California that we had is with the people who were unvaccinated, spreading it to other people who were unvaccinated, and more importantly, spreading it to kids who are too young to actually take the vaccine.
I got a question for you. And I don't mean to be a dick about it. Because it's
you're always a dick. That's kind of like your nature.
Yeah, like I said, I don't mean to be. So do you get the flu vaccine?
No,
Ever.
I do not.
Okay. So, do you know why it's important that people get the flu vaccine?
I am well aware of why people say it's important to get the flu vaccine, and I also know the
And
probability
you know the bullshit that
associated
you're
with
thinking
it.
right now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's the reason why you get the flu vaccine is to get rid of the predominant majority strains of flu that are circulating.
Yes,
if you can.
that is true.
Right. So here's the fun thing, and this is actually
and,
good.
and I want to be very
lead-in.
clear. I want to be very clear. Again, I'm not an anti-vaxxer.
Yeah.
When I get to be 60 plus years old, I will probably start getting the flu vaccine because at that point my risk goes up to an unacceptable level. But
Here's the other
prior
major
to that,
thing.
I will not.
Here's the other major thing you've been actively not doing, which is important because anti-vaxxers are kind of cuckoo in the head. You haven't been actively advocating people not get vaccinated. You've mostly been talking about your personal decisions, which is really what you should be doing.
You should absolutely 100% get vaccinated, right? If you are talking about your standard childhood vaccinations have successfully eliminated massive diseases that
for the most part
have struggled with for millennia.
What you've actively been doing is contemplating out loud your personal decisions about different vaccines.
Well, that's
specific.
You're
not sitting there saying generally the vaccine is not a vaccine. Don't take it.
No,
it's about you, which is fine.
Yep. And the fact that again, if nothing changes, then it's not really a vaccine. And again
literally the definition is that it raises your immunity.
I still stand with it's borderline gene therapy. I agree that it is not gene therapy, but it is in that borderline.
I also kind of take that stance, but we've got. I think we're getting into a bit of a
there's something I can lead into
tangent here, so I don't know if there's really a lot more to be discussed on this, unless you want to just have a whole discussion on
there's something more. No, I'm not going to rehash. Right? It leads into something else.
He wants to win, Evan. He wants to win. It's okay.
No, I already know I won. What I'm doing is bringing up a new topic.
You didn't win. There's no winning.
Absolutely won.
You never win.
I won because I said I did. So, yeah, I'm not a dick. All right. So there's a big issue that's been coming out, and this I want to warn you guys now because there's a feeling I'm getting out of this is the same exact shit I was feeling around this time last year. So heckles up. The whole thing where people haven't been taking it seriously enough to not get their asses infected and are conjuring these new strains is a problem right now. There's a study that came out of Brazil, which has magically already transmitted this fucking new strain to Japan, because why not? There's a study that came out of Brazil. There was a region, Malacca or whatever. I can't remember the fucking name of the place. But it's the largest city in the Amazon.
That you linked to me. I'll put that in the link so that everybody can actually check this out.
It's the largest city in the Amazon, or largest place in the Amazon, I'll put it like that. About 3/4 of the city is hypothesized to have already had the infection. What they found, and this is by the end of September or whatever, and what they found in December, December 20th, was when the study was being conducted, and then it was recently published. What they found was that this variant P.1 or P1, the UK variant, by the way, that everybody's been talking about, is B117 or 113. Can't remember. It's one of the two.
For those of you who don't know, when we start talking about viruses, the B117 is actually a very specific nomenclature that talks about a specific set of proteins that appear on viruses because they're so small. Yeah, it is actually, it does matter. Right?
Specifically, the spike protein is what we're talking about right now.
Right, exactly. So when we start talking about viruses, there's actually a reason why he's referring to them with these nomenclature.
Okay, so the B113 or 117, I think it's 117. That one is the one that they've been talking about over in the UK. That's predicted to be the predominant one in the US by March. And again, without getting too far into the weeds on the vaccine thing, chide me as you wish. The vaccine as it stands now, vaccines as they stand now, are still going to be effective against the UK variant.
Which again, I will chide you. I do not believe that anyone can make those kinds of proclamations without an actual study.
With knowledge to date, it is predicted to remain as effective as it is with the basal strains it was made for, the monoclonal, multiclonal antibody, monoclonal, multiclonal assays. So the white blood cells that have been previously been exposed and are used as the basis for the in vitro research. So petri dish stuff. So that variant is predicted to be still predicted to be protected against by the vaccines. However, 13 out of 31 in the study, and I know that they've done more research, and it bears out in roughly the same proportion. So about a little over a third of the people in that area that are subsequently exposed get a reinfection, as they've been calling it, which is just another infection with a new strain. So basically, the previous infection imparted no real immunity against contracting the disease again from the second variant, P1.
Which is one of the reasons why we should suspend all of our infection protocols and just kind of operate as normal, because that's kind of what's going to end up happening.
Well, no, this is something that is preventable. It is.
I disagree. I disagree firmly.
So the point
at the end of the day, where we were in March when we started turning around doing lockdowns and all the other ridiculous shit.
The thing that is supposed to come out of this is not a discussion about immunity again. The point is that the response is going to be, and I'm saying this is because it's what's going to happen regardless of your thoughts on it. The response is likely going to be 2 or 3 rounds of different vaccines, akin to the way that we take care of influenza year to year, which is one of the reasons I brought up influenza earlier in discussion. So the difference this time being that instead of having too many strains due to the mutation rate to handle, there's a small enough number of strains that are significantly different enough to cause different infections that it is plausible to get all of them within the same dosing regimen. So the other strain that's of note that is worrisome is out of South Africa. So South Africa and Brazil have basically spawned these 2 strains, which are probably going to be a problem. The one in Brazil is known to reinfect, so known to cause a new infection of COVID in someone who's been previously exposed to a different strain. The one
which, by
South
the way,
Africa,
operates largely as a minor cold.
So get into that later too if you want. It's fine.
Yeah, that is a valid point.
But
continuing.
You can say we'll say that for now.
So coronaviruses as a whole are responsible for the common cold.
Well, no, they're not predominantly responsible for the common cold. They are a minor part of the common cold. You know that. They're like 3% of the fucking cases that.
No, they're more than that.
It's adenovirus, norovirus, and a couple others, and then coronavirus.
I could have sworn coronavirus was like 20 to 30%.
No, it can't be that high.
I'm pretty sure.
I'll give you that.
Yeah, but
I'll just assume.
I'm talking about previously. Like coronaviruses are pretty much one of the more common things.
My memory there's a 3 involved somewhere, and my memory is fuzzy enough where you could easily be right.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, yes, you're right. Adenoviruses and noroviruses are common, very, very common.
So, and they are mild. Let's not forget rhinitis from rhinovirus, which is the big one. So
that's true.
So, all right, let's move on from there. The thing here is that the one out of Brazil is known to be able to cause new COVID infections, or new COVID disease, which is fucking redundant now. New COVID disease in people who have had a prior infection with a different variant. So if you had the one that's already been going around all the time, and then you get the P1 infection, it's going to give you basically full-blown COVID again. There doesn't appear to be any real innate immunity that persists with that discrepancy there. Now, once you get P1, it's likely that you're going to be immune to P1 for a while. You know, the 1 to 2 years that's typical for coronavirus. The one out of South Africa may or may not simply be the same kind of mutation that's happened in UK. I think between the two, I think one of them is the 113 and one of them is the 117. That might have been where I got my confusion there.
Last I checked, there are 3 major new strains. One's from the UK, one's from Africa, and one's from South America.
So the point being that the one in Africa
the UK one is more infectious.
The one in Africa is positive to be more infectious. That's largely the thing.
I thought the UK one was more infectious, but the one from Africa was more lethal.
So the one in the UK is positive to be more lethal by a recent study, by the way.
Oh, really?
Now we're talking about a fucking RCH. So it may or may not more study is needed.
Yes.
The one out of Africa is posited in the same manner, to my knowledge, to be more infectious, is known to be more lethal. The one coming out of Brazil is a problem because it is known to cause new secondary infections. After you've had the
that one is
original
different
one.
enough that your body doesn't really recognize it.
It's different enough to be a new disease, to a new virus that the body doesn't recognize immediately. Like the antibodies in vitro studies are not easily recognized by the monoclonal series that has been used. So the white blood cells that have been kind of bred to recognize COVID, as we've known it so far, don't easily recognize the virus. And the antibodies don't really adhere very well. So there's enough of a difference where they don't really, the key doesn't quite fit the lock properly. So
I mean, I will state that my opinion again, right?
Right.
So and I want to be very clear here. There is a very brief window in which you can do something about a plague. Let's call it a plague, right? Plagues are typically used for bacterial infections because they tend to be worse. But we're going to call it a plague on mankind rather than pandemic, because the news media shouldn't deserve credit to keep on, pumping out random things that people
I don't know. I mean, this will be great when it comes back to World War P, and they just make another fucking Brad Pitt movie.
But the bottom line is that you have a very brief time
they can fuck it up in Haifa again
with microbiology in which you can actually do something.
Or Jerusalem, rather.
And that time was like December to November of 2019.
So right? I want to go ahead and point
China
out something.
China fucked that shit up, and now at this point, I suspect that Craig's right on this one. Right, I suspect
they learned the wrong lessons from SARS. And they applied them to SARS too.
Well, I don't even know if it's that, right? Like I kind of think.
Well, they learned they learned what the global public response is going to be.
Yes.
They learned that they can lie to the WHO for months and not have any worries about it. And then they invaded the fucking UN and they got their people in position because Tedros was a fucking China puppet and got him to lie for 7 whole ass days.
And this is without even getting into Tedros' dirty laundry, of which there is a
China
wealth.
got to sit there and take advantage of the fact that the rest of the world will overreact to this thing. China has the ability to
they thought they were
going to their own apartments.
They thought they were going to swoop in and be the savior. That's what they were going to launch the China century by swooping in as the savior, and then they fucked that up too.
Well, that's because they can't keep it under control in their own population. The bottom line is that China figured that they would let it spread, and that's really what it looks like from my perspective at this point.
From every sane perspective.
And can we just comment now how nice it is the fact that we can actually mention that this came from China and that it might actually have come from a Chinese lab? That is finally not a verboten...
burning documents, they're deleting shit left and right as the inspectors are coming in because they can't hold off the international pressure anymore.
Let's be very clear. According to news media in the United States, it's Trump's fault. But for the rest of us who
actually... That is true. Trump was over there with his gene hammer on the science anvil, just hammering out the atoms
for the rest
into
of us,
individual chains.
The rest of us who actually have cognitive skills, the reality is that you have a very short window to contain a virus in an outbreak like this. And that is a matter of like days to a matter of weeks.
I gotta say this one too.
By the time we hit February, like it was too late. When they turn around in January and said, when they turn around and they said that they were hitting 10,000 cases over there and they found nothing in the United States, everybody should have just been like, well, shit, we're basically fucked. Because by the time it hits 10,000 cases that are detected in China, which is still a third world country, right?
Yeah,
it is already circulating within our major cities.
Barely.
They're only a third world country for economic purposes because that's the way they get benefits from the fucking World Monetary Fund.
Well, I mean,
the International Monetary Fund.
Don't forget, right? As much of their population is, has graduated from agrarian culture to slavery, right? There is still the rest of their population that is agrarian, and therefore it's still a third world nation.
So here's the thing, and I'm not going to say they did everything right because they did a lot of shit wrong. But one thing they did do right was actually close off their fucking borders. You look at New Zealand.
They didn't close off their borders.
Not initially. Right.
Not initially, but they locked down as hard as anybody did.
They didn't do it initially because Orange Man bad. All right. Then they actually decided to get with it once it became socially and politically acceptable to call Orange Man bad the other way. So they actually locked down, and they actually have hardly any of the restrictions, and they have quarantine measures that are required upon going in and out. They have a whole bunch of different measures in place to prevent with anybody.
Yeah, like even with mainland Australia.
They have locked down hard.
You were talking about the China stuff.
Oh, fuck no.
No.
They sent 5 million people to northern Italy at the very beginning of this shit.
Yeah, no.
Fucked over the entirety of Europe.
Absolutely. So the point that I'm making, though, is that you have a very short period of time in which you can deal with a virus.
Yeah. But I'm also saying that my point earlier,
at which point we have talked about this, where Craig has said that he doesn't want it to go seasonal. Guess what? You have that 2-week, maybe 3-week window.
Yeah, my point is that New Zealand has actually locked off and gotten their shit squared away, and they did it right the first time. Well, 15th time through.
They actually did it. It's easier to do that as an island nation.
Absolutely. They have a tiny fraction of the U.S. population.
And
my point is that it was able to be done.
Joe Biden inviting all of the illegal immigrants that he can into the country.
Oh my God, yeah.
We have zero hope of ever containing this thing.
No, here's the thing. States don't have to follow that fucking mandate, though. They don't have to go around that way.
It doesn't. It doesn't matter, though, dude. Like it doesn't.
Yeah, it does matter. It does matter because, while shit like freedom of movement is tied up in the courts, we can actually get rid of the disease, and everyone go, oh yeah, my bad. Here's $1,000. Go home.
It's done. Right? We have bought that ticket. There's nothing we can do at this point. So you might as well sit there and decrease all of your infection protocols because you're no longer.
Now you just sound like fucking Biden.
No.
Yeah, you do. He literally fucking said that.
Mandate.
He literally fucking said there's nothing we can do.
Oh, absolutely he did, because he, for the first time he actually sits there and looks up at
he sat down and listened to the scientists finally.
Yeah,
right?
for the first time. The bottom line is, we shouldn't be having mask mandates. We shouldn't be having lockdowns. We're just going to have to deal with it at this point.
Again,
because there's nothing we can do.
I think that a mandate is also immoral.
Well, that's a separate issue.
Right, so I think having a mask on is a smart move, but I also think it should be your decision to do it.
I disagree.
Everybody should have that right.
Hold on. Before you sit there and stay your mask thing, you just need to sit there and put all 30 caveats that come with your position.
No, not even going down that road. Just saying, look.
No. We're gonna go down that road.
No, not going down the road. I'm saying, as an adult,
I demand that if you turn around and you want to suggest something,
I'm not even going to suggest something right now. What I'm saying,
caveats with that suggestion.
Not even going to suggest something right now. I'm going to say that you, as an adult, are capable of making adult decisions, and you should make your adult decisions and live with the consequences of them. And that's, I'm pretty sure, par for the course in a planet ruled by adults. Except for all the fucking socialists and communists that don't want to live with the results of their fucking decisions and want none of the responsibility for them.
Listen, New York wants $15 billion from the rest of you motherfuckers.
Yeah, you know what? They shouldn't get it.
No,
I agree.
Dime.
I think it should all come out of de Blasio's pocket.
As an individual living in New York, I will happily move to another location when he sits there and raises our taxes. But I do think that it should be him raising the taxes and dealing with the social consequences of him raising the taxes.
I think that they should all that deficit should come right out of his pocket.
Wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that be nice? But
I think you should get the fucking loans and default on them.
Yeah, maybe they need to nationalize his monies.
He can go out looking like Jesus. He can pay for all his own sins.
Yeah, if there was only enough money
Physician,
to cover it.
Heal thyself, Herr Quomler.
He can go ahead and take that analogy right out of South Park and live it the real one.
Or he can just sit there and grab himself a whole bunch of the, goys down in Brooklyn there and give them a gold star and put them to work. That's worked before, right?
Yeah, right. That lasted so long too.
Yeah, he's made a lot of friends in that area.
I gotta tell you, if he went ahead and started doing that shit, the Jewish mafia, which doesn't exist, would be on his ass.
You know what?
You know that whole idea where they say all the Jews. No, you
I'm
know that
sure
thing where
there's
they're
a
like,
Jewish
there's a
one.
Jewish leadership that controls the world. Like, he might actually fucking create it if he's not careful.
Well, I mean, what is
Because
it?
it would be focused on New York first, but after that, it might metastasize.
As I remember it, Hasidic Jews are 115 for their average IQ, something like that. Like they are
Could be.
stunningly above the rest of the population. Stunningly above the rest of the
The
population. So
Jews
yeah,
in general are kind of close to that, yeah.
Yeah, but if we get into that, we start straying into
Other things like is IQ intelligence? No, it's not.
no, I mean it
There
actually is.
are some very intelligent retards. Put it
No,
like
no,
that
I
out
mean
there.
there are IQ largely is intelligence.
It is the potential to be intelligent.
That's a fair assessment.
Even that's a shitty way of describing it.
No,
Yeah,
I mean
there's a gray area between the two.
I think it's your fundamental the difficulty you have, right? So
it's the nature part to the nurture.
When we start talking about IQ, when we start talking about this thing, it is fundamentally it's like your hardware on your computer, right?
Sure.
It doesn't matter if you put the world's shittiest OS on that hardware. It doesn't matter how good that hardware is. It's still run the world's shittiest OS.
I wouldn't even liken it to specific on there. I'd say that you could think of it as like a combination of your CPU and RAM.
Yeah.
But I was just about to say it's like having more RAM, but then I realized, it's still not quite it because you have the processor thing too. But
no, it's kind of difficult to explain to people who don't
imagine
really
it being like a really large L2 cache. Just to make it as confusing as possible for everyone.
Yeah, that's a great way to go.
You're getting pretty esoteric with the references here.
No, I mean it's really your fundamental hardware. It's your ability to analyze a complex world around you and solve puzzles and those kinds of things. Yeah. They have tried to remake IQ into things
they've tried to make it so many times and it just hasn't worked.
They've tried to do it. What ends up happening is IQ holds up, and whether you
get
call
another
it
IQ
G
test.
or whether you call it whatever the fuck you want to call it, it ends up being the exact same thing.
Yeah,
they've tried to sit there and say, oh, well, it's self-determination or self-willpower, which they call grit. And what they found is that IQ basically is like 90% of your success in the world, and grit is like 10%. At the end of the day, IQ absolutely matters. What Craig is referring to is that just because you have a high IQ doesn't mean you know anything.
You can be a lazy sack of shit that doesn't do anything with it.
You can be a lazy sack.
And there are
you
enough
can
of
be
those
a
people.
gender studies major, and it doesn't matter how much of your IQ has been applied to your gender studies major. You still are outputting absolutely nothing of value.
You could have had the lengthiest, most in-depth, thorough examination of a topic and a thesis, getting a PhD in gender studies. You could have written an entire Britannica set on how gender is involved in every single part of society, etc. And at the end of the day, you'll have contributed a whole bunch of firewood to future generations.
And the best part of all...
And toilet paper.
The best part of this is even if you do all this, you've still actually built less than an underwater basket weaver. At least they have woven a basket underwater with their degree.
Those Chinese underwater basket weavers, they're pretty industrious motherfuckers.
Right. But you have to think about it, though. If you want to specialize,
you just gotta whip them a little bit, or maybe sit there and threaten to harvest their uncle.
So the point being, though, if you choose that as a major in American university, probably not going to be going back over to China and making.
You there? Guys? Hello? What's happened? Has my internet died? That would be a bother. Yep. Internet died. Alright. 113, 13. Well, I'll just keep recording until then. Is it back? Or is my internet down? What's the deal? I better just close it. just keep recording. I'll reopen Discord. Yeah, no, we're still online. What in the world happened? Starting?
Ah, shit.
Oh,
Now
hey.
he's back.
Okay, so did that die for you guys too, or just
It
me?
did. It did indeed. It was pretty great. We had some of our best discussions ever. You just missed it.
Dalton.
Let me make a
Are you back
note
on?
of where we were. I just kept recording because, I mean, I don't know. I
Okay.
thought my internet died or something. I was just at a
Must
total
have.
loss there.
You know what? I'm pretty sure Google probably detected you and said,
No, they're having COVID discussions. Verboten.
Yeah, probably so.
You know, so one of the things that we kind of like we deviated off of. I am really surprised at how much the elites and whatnot are reining it in.
Oh, yeah,
I really am.
record
Like
time.
I did not expect them to have as much power over their unwashed masses
Oh,
as
you know
they
why?
seem to.
You know why? You know why they're doing that with like Antifa types, right? Because they
I'm
did the one
assuming it's
thing.
money.
They did the one thing that you're not. Well, it does come down to money in one way. They did the one thing you're not supposed to, which is to bite the hands that feeds you. And they beat the shit out of the Democrat headquarters in Portland.
Well, so actually, I was thinking.
Right?
Well, not only that, I mean, the fact that they're even out there to exist today after their usefulness has been used up.
They're all screaming about how Biden's the devil and shit.
I was actually thinking the reason that you see things like the New York Times all of a sudden firing people who seem to be biased, right, on their own personal Twitter and social media accounts, right? I actually suspect that's because of the collapse of Fox News. Right, all of a sudden they realized that conservatives weren't just part of the brainwashed masses, and they might be willing to pony up for a subscription if they only stopped sitting there and sucking Biden cock.
That's the thing.
That, and they've already gotten done the objective of getting the guy into office, so they don't have to play that game anymore.
That's the funny part. That's the funny part is Biden is actually now dealing with the same reporter bullshit as Trump. I did not expect that.
So the fun thing is the Obama press pool is back, but they're going after Golden Boy, who was thumbing his nose while Obama was on stage.
Yeah.
So he's not able to get away with everything yet because he's not the young black man that he was criticizing the first time around.
It will be interesting to see if
there's a polished black man on stage.
I'm just.
Oh, that's not racist, right?
Well,
I'm just
not only that too.
I mean, like I listened to a Democrat on Thursday, right? And it was painful. It was absolutely, like, I commented to my wife, I'm like, I don't even understand how this person can physically exist, because they're contradicting themselves. They're like, oh, it was so nice. You know, it was so nice to hear, this non-vitriolic press conference, except for that one time a reporter asked him a challenging question, then Biden went after the guy. I'm like, so 100% of the times Biden was challenged, Biden gave the other guy shit. Got it. Thank you. What an improvement.
So you know what the end game is, right? And everybody knows what the end game is. But you know what the end game is, just to say it out loud here, is they want Kamala to be POTUS.
Oh, yeah, no, you can feel the push.
They're going to shit on him until he cracks on stage one time, and then Pelosi, who enacted this plan in fucking October, is going to come out with that body from Congress. And do you think Kamala's going to hesitate for a fucking moment?
Well, I mean, she called the guy racist almost to his face.
No,
right.
No.
And a racist, a rapist, etc.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean,
he
these
fits
are all words.
All the bad stuff on the totem pole for the progressive stack.
Well, but I mean, at the end of the day, Kamala's not any better.
Well, but she's a black woman. That's what makes
true.
Her better.
That's true. But
that
she
only
still
in a technical
sucked
sense,
her way to the top.
Look, she's only a black woman in a technical sense. But that makes her black enough and woman enough for her to be the one who steps into the open.
We won't talk about her family's propensity for slave ownership either.
I suspect we have the problem with Kamala wearing whiteface.
Well, I mean, she does have the right having having the slave owners in her past, but You
Well,
know,
that's the fun thing.
or
in
just
her present.
literally be coding with all of the white people
her own
in
past.
it.
Or in her present, where she kept people in prison well after their fucking sentence ended.
Oh my god, yes.
That reminds me of a really cool picture I saw of her that was done up with faces of all the different people that she kept over their sentences to do slave labor, basically, for the state.
Let me pull up some pictures here. We can see if it was one of these.
Oh yeah, I think I retweeted it earlier.
I am absolutely stunned that they're going after him even a little. I think my favorite was there's this 200-page Biden plan, but it's the same thing as the Trump plan.
Yeah.
Like all of a sudden he sat there and he talked to people. He found out that Trump was doing everything in his power. Like, oh, thanks guys.
Control J and showing.
Although that does remind me.
Yeah,
of
it was actually painful listening to this. It was, oh my god, there's not this antagonistic press conference except for that one time that somebody challenged him, and you're like, wait, so you're complaining that
it's instantly
the press
antagonistic.
Right, exactly. And what was it? What was the other one? I'm trying to remember. The guy came up and he's like, at least he had this 200-page plan, and he admitted it might not work, and he basically it was
like,
the exact same thing as what Trump said.
Yeah, I'll copy the link to this tweet so that anybody that wants to see this lovely collage that made up Kamala's face can get a chance to take a look at it.
I mean, I know this isn't Kamala, but it could be related. And it just gets worse. Oh, no, that's not the right one.
Don't mix Kamala and Kabbalah.
This one, no, this is Big Mike.
No, probably shouldn't. That would not be safe.
That would not be safe.
Notice how it just gets.
Imagine if you summoned Kamala with the Kabbalah.
Look how that would be a bad day. Every time you feed this face back into the thing, it just comes out worse and scarier. Let me just go ahead and delete this one. So it doesn't work if you have multiple faces. You have to scratch the other one out in paint and then put it back in. It becomes worse and worse.
You really love that Tune Me thing.
It's fucking hilarious.
There's some really fun algorithmic and AI drawing stuff. Like what's the one? Art Breeder is pretty cool. There's just a lot of.
You guys haven't seen Fudge Dread. Well, did you guys check out the shit posting in the other server and see the Fudge Dread link?
I can't say I'm familiar.
I saw that a little bit, but like it just sounded like.
Oh god, it's so much fun. This is so funny. It's just like these guys are trying to rob the place, and the cop comes in out of nowhere.
Oh yeah.
I don't play. You messed with the wrong motherfucker.
Let me see if I can find.
Yeah, so our local convenience store is known as Stewart's.
Mm-hmm.
And Stewart's is the safest place to be because there is always a cop, pretty much 24/7 at every local Stewart's. A, I think they get free coffee, and B, they just don't go anywhere else.
Oh hell yeah!
So like the Cumberland Farms, which is actually an area, a store that we kind of like grew up with out where we were in Massachusetts, because that was the common thing there. Like they're pretty much unprotected. Like, it's the Wild West if you go to Cumberland Farms. But if you go to a Stewart's, there is police response is all of 20 seconds away because there's either one coming in or going out.
Well, that's at least you've got one place you can run to for security.
Yeah, right. Like,
speaking of
it's
security,
probably
that's something
faster
else
than me calling dispatch.
We do really well to discuss too. Because in some of our earlier episodes, we talked about what you'd want to do as far as picking up a phone that you can actually have some degree of anonymity with. That's probably really wise to go over again. So a lot of your prepaid phone services, like Boost Mobile, for instance.
So like you can go with that you can get a rooted Android phone. Android you don't need to have. You don't have to have one of those with the Google OS on there. There's plenty of alternatives.
I mean, to be fair though, most of the Android roots are going to be Google OS.
Well,
you're not going to have a lot of junk in there.
There's ways to do the entire experience without having Google touch it.
That's true.
Completely. Like, and you can
there
have
are
things
Linux
that are all
kernels.
completely independent. And the best thing about it is, you don't have to like. If you do it right, it's pretty darn seamless. And there are multiple alternatives that are functional, fast, and useful for everything that you might worry about going on in your phone as it stands right now if you're an Android user. There's multiple alternatives for every feature that you might be concerned about. For instance, maps. There are multiple different map services that are out there that are as good, if not better, than Google Maps at this point. And most of them are community sourced. And basically, you have to worry about some things, mind you. You might occasionally see something rather unfortunate that might happen on one of the pictures. But for the most part, as they're community sourced, if something like that's spotted, it'll be quickly corrected. People doing fun things like laying out sandbags to form a swastika as a car goes by. But for the most part, you're not going to see stupid shit like that.
Nah, more weird things.
Or the people that might bend over and show things that you don't want to see.
I'm actually very impressed with the people who find the Google cars and race ahead just so they can fuck as it passes. I am truly like, those people are heroes of our generation.
The unsung heroes.
The unsung heroes. They had a plan, and it was conjured in an instant, and they executed it with the utmost dignity and respect that is due.
Well, due to Google, so yeah. I mean, there is that.
I mean, so one of the things that we talked about, and we've talked about this a couple times when we talk about like OPSEC and things like that. The bottom line is for me, my rule is loose lips sink ships. If you, it doesn't matter what security protocols you engage in, you are always the weakest link, because it is the easiest thing to do to penetrate your technology. I know what you're gonna say.
But I'm right.
That's the intent. No, I disagree.
No,
right?
That's only true if you make it true.
No, I mean, it always is true.
It's not always true. If your password's fucking password, I'm looking at you, Mr. Podesta, then it's not fucking true, is it?
I mean, I guess that's true, but at the same time, you talk about the people who were at the Capitol riot, right? And I'm not saying that it's a riot. I still firmly
support they're walking around with their fucking cell phones, low jack in their every position. Yeah, that was
right. Or you have the people who are sitting there and going on with their pictures, and they're going on to like Tinder and shit like that, and advertising that they were there. And all of a sudden, all of these like hardcore liberal women are reporting.
Look, Mom, I was terrorist adjacent.
Guess what? You're like, that's kind of the thing. Is at the end of the day, if you do stupid shit, a better protocol is to honestly just not say shit online. It is much easier to just not say shit online, not say shit over the phone. You can sit there and adopt whatever protocol you want, but you should assume that whatever thing that you are adopting, by the time you get to see it and by the time you get to implement it, the NSA already is a full surveillance network attached to it.
Yeah, it's pretty safe to assume that if you're putting anything out there, it's being monitored unless you're, speaking directly into someone's ear.
So that's one of the things that if you're going to do something that is secure, one of the things that you learn early on, if you're doing real, tight security, is that you need to air gap everything.
Yeah.
You have to have non-networked devices that are just permanently non-networked. You have to pick a revision of whatever operating system, whatever the other shit that you want to do, and you're going to stick with that, and then that's it. Not going to touch another network until you're done with it, and then you just break it. Assume that every hard drive you ever use is going to have a copy of all the data you ever put on it. Even though that's not true. That's just, if you make that assumption, you're never going to lose one.
There are means to actually fully, clear something up, but those means in and of themselves are legitimately suspicious. Should someone go to look.
When you do air gapping, you have to have either one-way or two-way quarantining that you do. So if you have a missions critical system that has, say, all of your encryption keys and whatever on it, if you're never going to have to decrypt your own data on that device, everything that ever interacts with it has to be fresh, completely clean, and then never interacts with that computer again. If you want to do decrypting, you should have a second device that has the necessary keys on it, and even then, you should assume that everything that goes into it can't leave that computer again. And this is, again, if you want to have isolation and full security using air gap. So
air gap is the only method that I would actually
even
recommend.
that doesn't completely work, by the way, because
no, it doesn't. It doesn't.
Just by the way, and this is if someone really, really wanted to find out what you're doing. There's other ways to do it, but this has been something that has been demonstrated. Back before CRTs phased out, it was easily enough. It was capable of being done. Getting an image off of your screen, sitting in a van outside.
Yep.
There's enough of an EM that comes off your system with a CRT because you have that electron gun firing at that screen. There's enough of that going on where you can basically your radio broadcasting on your monitor.
I mean, beyond that though, right? Like the reality is that we live in the Internet of Things. The more stuff you have connected, the more points of access that you have. You are fundamentally only as secure as the weakest link in your system.
Which, again, by design, should be you.
But in reality, it is probably your phone that is probably nearby that is recording everything you're doing at this very moment. So
remember, when you click through the click wrap on it to get your access to your device and start using it, you are agreeing to allow your phone to listen to you for advertising purposes. And that advertising data is then shareable via subpoena, national security letter, or just plain service offered by the company to law enforcement. So if you're worried about having someone dragnet you, and then, for instance, and this is a thing that has happened, implicating you in something that you were completely innocent of. If you're worried about your phone doing, collecting, say you're yelling at somebody in CSGO or whatever, talking about all the wonderful ways you're going to destroy their corpse with your dick. And then somehow that ends up getting into a recording through advertising actions on your device. And then, somehow that gets filtered out and then offered up to law enforcement later on. And they go, aha, we have a serial killer who's been dicking people to death. Let's go ahead and find him and round him up. Like, this is an absurd scenario, but something somewhat similar to this is plausible. Like, this kind of shit does happen. And if you're worried, things like the Amazon Echo, all that kind of stuff, where they say it's completely secure, that's already been used in court. Recordings off of Amazon devices have been used in court already.
I'll put it this way. Right? So I have to deal with security. Security is a real concern for what I have. We are trained formally in security for my job. It's a real thing, right? Like what a lot of what we talk about here is theoretical shit. But man, let me tell you, it is the creepiest thing when you're talking about things like what the FBI was doing when we were talking about the Mueller case a couple of years ago, or when we're starting to talk about election fraud, and all of a sudden the Alexa comes on and says, "What was that? I didn't catch that." And that happens all the time. You're not saying anything that sounds like a keyword. You're not saying anything like Alexa doesn't come into that conversation. It's listening in constantly. Those microphones are always on.
Here's the other thing about that, and this is the part of the marketing that is completely a lie to me, completely a lie in general, and pisses me off. When they say that none of the stuff you say is stored on the device,
that's irrelevant.
Here's the thing: they're factually incorrect because in order for your voice to be processed, it is buffered and then passed through the speech recognition chip.
It's still not technically.
They're
it's probably
physically
fair
incorrect.
to say. It's probably fair to say that your device your voice is not stored on the device, right? Like nobody's going to be able to come in and physically access the device and retrieve your voice, but it doesn't matter.
They could
because
retrieve
the second
a small
that
amount
you
of
actually
it,
maybe they'd be able to retrieve a small amount.
It's possible. It is in
the majority. The reality is all this shit goes out to Amazon servers. All of it does. All of it does.
Absolutely.
Every single thing that you say in the presence of an Alexa goes out to Amazon servers and comes back.
So I went ahead and I kept one in my apartment up in Virginia for a while, largely because if you don't study these kind of things and do a threat assessment of your own, you're not going to know. So I went ahead and I looked at it. I kept it in there for a while.
Or you happen to be wedded to somebody who happens to really want to do smart home
Right.
shit. There's nothing that you can do about it at that point.
Well,
because
there
it makes
is
it convenient for her to flick a light switch on and off.
Yeah, but you see, you can do shit like that without having a server involved somewhere else.
You certainly can.
In fact, if you really want a
more
server,
complicated.
if you really want a server, there is freeware that you can use inside your own home with your own goddamn server that will not have to be connected to anything else. So, in any event, the end result here, I went ahead and I kept it in there, and then when I was moving, I looked at my dad was helping me. I said, you know what? When one thing I'm definitely not going to be doing when I get down there, right? And said, what? I said that device isn't coming out of the box. I used it in a place that was never going to be again.
That's about all you should ever do with any of these things. They should
So,
not
and now
go into a
I
place
know
you
about it.
can't
I
avoid.
have several of these devices. I've taken them apart and inspected them thoroughly. For instance, one thing I can tell you, they don't have a back. Well, at least I can tell you about the ones I had. They didn't have a backup battery in them at all. So if you're ever worried about unplugging the thing and having it spy on you, nah, not going to happen. But they don't really need that because they're always going to be on anyway.
Right. It doesn't work if it's not connected.
But like just to state the people out there who might be ignorant enough to have that healthy, suspicious paranoia going on, or who are not ignorant but are just paranoid, I can tell you right now, right off the bat, they're not going to continue listening to you after you pull the power.
Yep.
But again, if in terms of like storing and recording things on the device is required in order for the processor to process your information. It's a
true, but it's still going to be a very limited sample. It's going to get wiped on a regular
irrelevant.
basis.
The point is that their logic statement, their claim, is just fundamentally incorrect.
Yeah,
not
it is
possible
necessarily untrue.
Correct. Like in order for the device to do what it says it does, it can't be true.
That being said, it is generally true. It's just not going to be.
I would say, yeah, you're not going to get much out of it, but it stores, for instance, the last command you gave.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you could definitely get that. Like if you said, Alexa, kill my sister.
If you happen to build a death bot and that death bot happens to be connected to your Alexa, and you say, Alexa, murder my wife, you're going to be in a very bad state.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you turn around and say, Alexa, order Deathbot to pet the kitten, you're probably going to be fine.
Well, here's the other thing, though. In the same vein that you were just discussing earlier about the necessities of whether or not it's stored there or not, it's probably largely irrelevant unless Alexa's servers go down, because it's all on the fucking server anyway. And they've already demonstrated, they've already in public hearings, in criminal cases, used Alexa recordings to go after people in court and convict them.
Yeah.
So
at this point, we basically just don't know how long they keep the data, and it's safe to assume that they never get rid of it.
Yeah. Let's
keep in mind. Let's keep in mind, right? When we start talking about the para-terrorists in California that went and shot 17 people, something like that.
Right.
They Apple absolutely refused to allow the FBI access to the phone. When it comes to the Capitol people who walked into the building, stayed within ropes, didn't burn anything, and didn't really. I think they killed one or two people, killed one cop. Right? It's
and then,
sad,
of course,
but a real thing.
And 5 others got killed.
Shot in the neck.
Apple gave full access to all of their phones to the FBI within moments of the request going in. So when we start talking about these things, at the end of the day, your OPSEC is only as secure as you are. Just because they're protecting one specific group of people that they feel is good, right? That doesn't mean they're going to protect you. So the best thing to do is to not say anything. They would
the human element here
caught up as a problem.
And again, the human element here in this specific example is the fact that you used Apple in the first place.
Yep.
So all the security in the world isn't going to help you if they're just going to hand the keys over.
Right.
And it was your decision to get the damn phone. So
that's true.
So you can always work it back to a human element problem, unless, for instance, it's by mass collection by the NSA, where they have enough samples to deduce backwards what the key was and then just unlock it anyway.
Right.
If you've been putting it all on the internet. That's the thing, is there's a big if there. So if you air gap stuff that's mission critical, if you really do have something and this, by the way, works equally well for things that are trade secrets.
Yeah, we're not
Like,
just talking about, if you're doing something
not just
illicit.
paranoid
This
personal
is like
security.
people in IT. This is,
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
there are a lot of
I
people that have a
interviewed
lot of
to give you an
things that
idea.
need to
Like,
be
I
kept
interviewed
secret.
for a company, right? I interviewed for a company that does fuel cell work,
Right.
right? And one of the things that they were talking about is that they were trying to expand into China, but the problem that they have is
God.
IP stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's because China was basically bombarding their servers trying to take the information on the fuel cell company that I was looking to apply to.
Right.
Now, you turn around and you say that, right? And you're like, okay, well, maybe that's this one thing. But I had a buddy of mine who worked for one of our Polytech institutes. I'm not going to go into which one,
Right.
but he basically what he said was he was actually getting into encryption. And the reason that he was getting into encryption was because he could literally publish a paper on an intranet, and within a few hours, he would see a full-blown Chinese attack on the server just because he published a new paper related to nuclear energy.
Right.
Right? So when we start talking about these things, there's a dozen reasons why you should be doing this. It's not just, hey, the NSA is looking to get all of the information about you.
Yeah.
Like, if you are actually sitting there and concerned, there's a lot of scarier people out there than the United States government.
Well, let's suppose that, for instance, you are working in nuclear energy, and the U.S. government's going to have access to your data anyway because you're part of the United States government at that point.
Yes.
have to worry-
I live as a representative of the U.S. government. That is a true statement.
Speaking of such examples hanging out with us, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll give you an
Like,
example,
for
right? So
instance,
I
you
reached
wouldn't
out.
know-
I reached out to a school, and the school said, "Is it okay if I sit there and forward this email on?" I'm like, "Yeah, of course you can, right? Because it's like a letter of explication for when my GPA is crap." And he's like,
Right.
"Well, oh no, it was perfectly fine for you to contact me, but there's personal information." I'm like, "Oh, I've had a security clearance for so long, I don't even know that I have personal information." Like, my general worldview is that everything that there is to know about Steve is known about Steve by everyone who could possibly want to know about Steve.
That comes with being in a public position.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, if you're a publishing scientist like I am, then you have the same kind of problem. Like, I'm not gonna say like, oh, my name is Student. I don't work for Guinness, right?
Boo! Boo! Bad Craig.
I fucking love that story. All right, give me a
That
break.
is a great story, but it's still boo.
I mean, who wouldn't want to work for a beer company and then just like do the best math in the decade?
The people who don't know this, right? Fisher was the #1 statistician of his time, right? And so Fisher went to work for Guinness. And Guinness said all of his shit is going to be proprietary, but he came up with a great way that has been abused, by the way, by psychology majors ever since.
And everyone else. Yeah.
Right? So basically what he turned around and did was he was trying to find a way to prove that his carbonation cycle was like better for the beer.
They were testing like 1 out of every 3 beers.
Right. So he had an incredibly tiny sample size, but he was pretty convinced the results were significant. So he sat down one day and did all of the math out and proved that his results were significant and that you could get statistical significance on result sizes under 20 samples. Right? And that's called the student's T. And it's known as the T test. That's what it's known as.
But the reason it's known as the student's T test and not
is because he published it under the pseudonym of Student.
Yeah. And so that, by the way, is a great story. If you ever have someone who's thinking about chemical engineering as a career, that's what he was, as a chemical engineer.
Huh.
Yeah, sort of.
He was.
I mean, I guess.
All right, in the same way Dolph Lundgren is a chemical engineer, sure.
Yeah.
But he is a chemical engineer.
He was more process engineer than he was chemical engineer, but
that's the same thing.
No, it's not the same thing.
You don't hire a mechanical engineer to become a process engineer. You hire a chemical engineer.
I don't know. I've talked to a lot of mechanical engineers. They're pretty sure they can pull it off.
Yeah,
I laugh at them.
I'm sure they're
I
they
laugh
can pull
at
it
them
off, but...
extensively, but they're pretty sure.
Oh no, I would be surprised if they weren't sure. They're just
Meckies
wrong.
are.
They can
The
be very,
arrogance
very
of Femi-
certain and wrong.
Oh, actually, that's
All
not
of
a bad
the worst.
segue into certainty and wrongness. So,
Uh-oh.
well, no. I mean, before we got into the show, we were talking about the Paris Climate Accords and hitting the numbers for the Kyoto Protocol, right?
Oh,
Well, I mean, so the short of it is that Joe Biden has decided that we should rejoin the Paris Climate Accords, which is fucking
Yes, he
retarded. We talked a little bit about it last week, but the short of it is that if you looked at all of the U.S. and all of the other first world nations, the actual temperature change that we would make in the future temperature is going to be like 1/100th of a degree or 1/10th of a degree or something like that Celsius.
Yeah,
Over
never
the next
minding that we're one of the
100
least
some odd
polluting
years.
nations on the face of this earth at the moment.
Right. So China, the bulk of the changes in the 1.5 degree C emission is not coming from the U.S. That is coming from China and India.
Yep.
And so the problem with the Paris Accords, which Trump properly recognized, is that basically China and India said, yeah, we'll do something if we feel like it maybe in the future.
No, I can go ahead and specify. It's so absurd, I have to just state it.
Okay.
They said that by 2030, they will stop increasing the rate of increase of their emissions per year. That means
Right.
they're going to stop accelerating the rate of emissions by 2030. Not that the
Right.
rate of emissions is going to go down, but it will
Right.
stop increasing as a value
Yes.
year per year.
Yes.
So
India
And by
and
the way-
China,
they're,
By the way,
India and China
they're not
incentivizing
even on
themselves
on
to-
target to hit that. Based
No, they're not
on
at
what
all.
They originally did.
Even though, here's the funny thing though, is that the best one is that Xi Jinping was last year, I guess, just to snub Trump, said that by 2030 China is going to have like ceased its emissions, which I think is going to be hilarious because like they said they went from the fucking Paris Accord where they said they're not going to do jack shit, basically, and then they said that by 2030 they're not going to have carbon emissions. Last year, that does not compute, especially with the fucking pandemic going on and them importing 80% of their energy.
We in the U.S. with all of our technology,
They're not going to be able to pull off
zero
nuclear by
carbon
then.
emissions.
They're going to
No.
try and pull off nuclear, and they don't have the resources to do it. All that thorium is in fucking India. So unless India becomes part of China in the next year or two, they're not going to be able to pull it off.
Even then, right? So what they're doing is that they're basically trying to convert coal plants into nuclear plants over there. That's what they're trying to do, right?
Now, I didn't say they couldn't build the plants, but I'm thinking they're not
That
going to
sounds
pull it off
like
because
a really bad
they don't have the
idea.
ore. They don't have I guess they have nukes. They could dilute with some.
No, I mean
raw,
there's a
but,
variety of different fuels you can use. At the end of the day, you should just basically regard whatever China says as a giant line of bullshit because basically they spend their entire time lying to the U.S. I still think my favorite is the United States needs to sit there and stop doing, systemic racism. Meanwhile, they're the only ones enacting genocide in the entire world anymore.
institutionalized genocide too.
Yeah.
Industrial, institutionalized.
By the
it's
way,
almost chattel.
By the way, a couple years ago, it was perfectly socially acceptable in China to take a black man, shove him into a washing machine, and have him come out Chinese.
No,
This
God,
is
that
a
was the
literal
funniest commercial,
advertisement,
too.
by the way. I will find it and I will link it because
That fucking.
it's astounding.
I know. And then last year, of course, as a part of a quarantine protocol, McDonald's in China decided that black people weren't allowed to come in because black people apparently were the ones spreading it. According to Chinese master whoever, some inspector of health issues.
It wasn't just McDonald's though, right?
It
was actually like a widespread.
Yeah, there was a video of the one black woman.
If you were American and had money, Chinese, or anybody but the black people.
And there was a mall that a black woman was getting escorted out of for the same exact reasons. There's a video of that too. And she was perfectly within her rights to be upset because she just basically got told, "You're black, you're out."
And the Chinese laundry detergent advertisement is probably one of the funniest ones. Like it actually makes me chuckle. It really does. Like it's so absurd, it's funny, but it is absolutely super racist.
Yeah, it is 1930s Looney Tunes racist.
Yeah, it really is.
Like the one with all the crows on the farm. It's that bad.
Oh yeah, like Birth of a Nation. Well, Birth of a Chinese Nation.
I'm actually watching this
with Chinese characteristics, I should say.
But there's endless examples of this shit, and it's not like it stopped being socially acceptable. It's still acceptable over there.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Oh yeah, there's a word for everybody that's not familiar with Mandarin. Baiduo. It basically means think of it like Karen, but it basically just means a feminist white woman who gets nothing done.
Stupid. It's stupid white Western woman that cares about issues but doesn't do anything about them.
Yeah. There you go. That's it entirely.
I thought that was
it's social justice warrior
white.
Basically.
No, I thought that was left white or whatever it was.
It's basically.
Yeah, but I mean, it's what it comes out to mean in a.
It basically means SJW.
Yeah,
pretty much. And
that's
a perfect segue into the other topic that we absolutely have to discuss.
Shit.
The boogeyman's boogeyman has risen
back,
from
ladies
the
and
grave.
Gentlemen. Business is good. It's been
August
7 years
never
almost.
Ends.
Hey, are we talking about Gamergate?
Gamergate's
I'm
back.
so excited because I've quit Twitter.
I've
quit Twitter and I've joined Minds, and I need to grow my account. And this was the fastest and easiest way to grow my account.
I gotta tell you this. Kathy Griffin discovered Gamergate this morning.
I know what you're talking about. You're talking about the one where she's like, is the reason that I was determined to be a little bit too extreme because of Gamergate?
She's trying to blame her getting canceled for that fucking head picture. The one with Trump's
where by the way, she decapitated a human head.
She tried to blame the picture with Trump's bloody cut off head in her hand for the reaction to that picture on Gamergate. Yeah, and she's like, I'm just learning about this now. Oh, fucking hell. And then, like, other things have picked up on it, and then someone else is now going after Glenn Greenwald, saying he's, part of the Gamergate crowd, and all the lessons learned from Gamergate are being used by people like him.
Oh, my
God. Bannon was very effective, and clearly Glenn Greenwald is part of that crowd now.
The bottom line with Gamergate, and I think we should go into it a little bit.
Oh, sure.
Gamergate, I think we've talked a little bit about the history before, but basically there was an individual who slept her way to recognition. That's the long and short of Gamergate, right?
It's kind of crazy. I wonder if Kamala Harris looked up to her.
Yeah, I'm sure she did. And so there's a whole lot of people who turned around and basically where they were like, why is this chick getting recognition for her? What was it? It was a choose your own adventure HTML links programmed by somebody else's software. Right, yeah. Like she did literally none of the work.
All she did was put the text in, and then it compiles the JavaScript for you, and it's all one web page.
So it is the lowest of the lowest tier. But they started calling her a game dev and innovative and all this other shit. Well, it turns out she was sleeping with all of them. Right? That's the short of it.
That's how she got. Like, here's the thing: if you look into the source code on the web page, it mentions one or two of the people that were giving her story time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, by name as contributors or people who helped. It's like, this is just conflict of interest 101.
Mm-hmm.
You don't do this shit.
Oh, yeah. No,
and it wasn't even, the thing is, it wasn't even strictly speaking her fault. She was just a slimy person. She was kind of irrelevant to the whole thing. Except for every time she complained, people gave her more press.
Well, I mean,
the thing that was really the problem was the fact that these five fucking, these five people.
It was.
Some of them were journalists.
All of these other people started giving her airtime.
Yeah, it was
no reason. And I mean, when we start talking about it, right? Like Gamergate basically settled on Nathan Grayson, which is the name of the dude. I'm gonna fucking name him because
And
why
here's
not?
the other thing, like,
absolutely.
it didn't
Right,
even.
so-
It wasn't even.
So the dude's name is
stories that did
Nathan
it.
Grayson, and Nathan Grayson wrote a puff piece on her in Depression Quest.
And he even
right? And
says
that's-
that he
that's
wasn't.
what-
That he didn't write a story on her. It's like, no, you absolutely fucking did.
No, he absolutely did. It was like top 10 game devs coming up
Right.
bullshit kind of thing, right?
And he was
And
sleeping
she
with
was
her at
like
the time.
number 1. So basically,
Yeah,
what
she
ended
was
up
number
happening,
1. He was number 3 on her list.
right? So
Of 5 guys.
so in any case, to give you an idea, to give the viewers an understanding, they turned around and Nathan Grayson argued that it's not a big deal. They didn't have a relationship at the time that he published the article.
Now here's
But
the thing.
when
They didn't
pressed,
even
it
argue that
turns
till
out
after.
that they started their sexual relationship 3 days after the article was published.
Here's the other side of that. They didn't even like come to the point where they were actively defending it, except for to Steve Totillo, because he was the editor and whatever. Like Steve Totillo tried, pressed a little bit on it, but they didn't even really start trying to defend anything until after they got called out for it, and then after all of the Gamers Are Dead articles came out. Gamers don't have to be your audience anymore. That was the actual inception of things. The avalanche that caused it was when they turned around and, as an industry, colluded in backlash at one time.
Within a 24-hour period, every major game publishing company published an article.
Gamers are dead.
Gamers are dead, or something therein. And
Gamers
it turns
don't have
out,
to be your audience
which
anymore.
pissed off even more people, right? And then they sat there and they had somebody who actually was in on one of these Skype chats or whatever the hell they had organized, where it found out that they had actually coordinated all of these articles to launch together.
So here's the funny thing. There was that. You remember that thing that broke out? Was it under Obama or no? It was before
it was
that.
in Obama's era. A
So
list.
it was called Journo Pros, and it broke out. It was a huge scandal. They had an email list that was going on. By the way, it was an email list. It wasn't Skype. Now they had other platforms they were on too, but the main thing was email list. So the mainstream journalism, mainstream press, there was a big scandal called Journo Pros, and it was a Journo Pros mailing list, an email list, and it was found people were colluding on things, they weren't vetting stories, etc., etc. Big scandal. It was kind of, they tried to sweep it under the rug, but they got caught out on it, and it still went away. But then it turns out that
don't expect the media to report on itself after all.
The dumbass apple didn't land far away from the shrub, and there was a list called Game Journal Pros, which was the exact same shit, and it's exactly how the whole entire Gamers Are Dead article barrage came out. They all agreed to say the same stupid shit, and they basically just copy-pasted a lot of the arguments between articles. So it really gave insight, though, when some of that stuff leaked, as to how collusive they were, and how it wasn't like they were specifically orchestrating hierarchically that they're going to be this kind of, they're going to engage in these kind of collusive actions.
It
was organic and it was an organic hive mind, is what it was.
It is.
The issue is best highlighted by Wikipedia, where when you take a Wikipedia article, which is something like Gamergate, right, which is basically games players versus games journalists. And they turn around and they go into Wikipedia, and the games journalists say that it's a hate movement against the games against women or whatever the hell the other group is. Well, the problem is that Wikipedia has, as part of its guidelines, that it's got to be officially sourced stories. So if every single games journalist conspires together to write the exact same narrative about what's happening, even if it's not representative of any facts of the situation, then all of a sudden Wikipedia says Gamergate was a hate monger movement that's associated with all this other stuff. And because that's what's being published, and that's the only source material, and because it's the gamers versus the people who are publishing the source material, the only thing that ends up getting into those articles is essentially the source material from officially published sources. And that's one of the problems that they had then, and it's actually one of the problems that's continued to this day with things like the Find People hoax or the Russian hoax or all of this other stuff.
Or the Wikipedia vandalism that is a very legitimate and rampant thing.
Right.
So there's actually a good example on Wikipedia that I actually ended up getting myself involved in because I'm an editor on there occasionally, not recently. But I went ahead and I jumped in on this one thing. There's this guy so one of the toxic people that was on there was a guy named Ryu Long. And if you do any of the atheism shit, you might also be aware of him fucking around with the other kinds of articles. He's the kind of guy who is so toxic that Rational Wiki kicked him off.
And if you don't know who Rational Wiki is, first, congratulations. Second, they're there's a term that's been bandied about here before.
Back
of scum
in the
and villainy.
days when atheist community was a big thing, Rational Wiki was basically highlighting the atheist arguments versus the standard non-secular.
Oh shit! I even have this fucking. This is a suspect wiki in itself, but I have this one here. I didn't even know this is what this guy looks like. Perfectly fits his personality, though.
Huh. Oh, yeah.
I will
make sure and link this so that anyone who's curious about who Ryu Long is.
Oh my god, I haven't seen that name in so long.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about, this guy. I got involved in the in some of the arbitration on a couple of different pages, and I ended up getting a barn star or whatever. Not for that one. Let's see. This one was blah blah blah. Okay, this was for a fucking feminist article or whatever. I got a civility barn star for not walking into something and immediately being a dick, apparently. But there's another thing that involved him, where it was just people had to submit comments on things. Yeah, well, I'm of one of those people that thought that the whole ethics issue was relevant, and apparently he thinks it's all about women's and shit, and it's just not.
Well, the fundamental issue
anyway.
was basically what you had an industry that the people who were reporting on an industry, right, were way too close to the industry, and that was always kind of a concern because every single time EA published a shitty game, they would get rave reviews until all of a sudden everybody had actually bought their copy of the game. And then they were like, what the fuck is this shit? A good example is Titanfall 1, which was one of the first games that was actually sold as a $60 game without a single player campaign. They had nothing other than you literally go fight people with mechs. And they sold it as a full-blown AAA title, story, the whole bit. And it could have been great. Titanfall 2 was actually pretty good. But that's not what they did. They included no single-player campaign. It was all, for intents and purposes, not much more than an advanced version of Call of Duty. People got absolutely pissed, but EA got all kinds of crazy rave reviews from all of the game websites leading up to its launch. So this was something that was brewing for a long period of time, and it just so happens that Zoe Quinn sleeping with everybody and putting out the lowest tier quality of game that could ever possibly exist.
I would say that
Wikipedia
itself is probably a better game than her fucking thing. I'd say it's her webpage is what she made. She made a webpage.
She made a web page, but I think we gotta sit there and be very clear, right? She made a web page using someone else's software. She literally did nothing on her own.
It's suspect that she even made the entire text adventure on her own.
Oh, she didn't. There was 5 other people in the project.
And I'm pretty sure that part of it was just plagiarized outright.
Right, and on top of that, it was stuff about mental health issues that she didn't involve any actual psychiatrist.
I was sitting there looking at it, and as a depressed person, going through that kind of shit, I was looking, all right, so this doesn't reflect any of my experience, and maybe that's just my thing different. It was what I was kind of saying to myself as I went through it, was maybe I'm just different, and she's saying from a different direction. It was I can see basically a fuck ton of cluster B and other problems in here, but I don't really see depression.
And having the same issues at the same time too, I can actually attest to that.
The worst of it was things like telling people who were depressed not to go seek psych help. Right?
Yeah, there's also that.
So she had other elements in there like, hey, yeah, you might be depressed, but you just need to sit there and grow up and get over it. Or you can
part of what it
adapt,
was
and
is
you can't.
or part of it also is, it's part of this culture of just put your mental deficiencies onto a Twitter bio and then it'll just come out okay. Everyone else should have to play along with your problems instead of the other way around.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you don't have to adjust yourself to live in the world. The world needs to adjust to you.
Yeah, that works so well.
Yeah,
you know what? We could ask the Uyghurs about that. I bet you if you gave the Uyghurs Twitter and they complained about being inside of a camp, people would be like, "Oh God, that sucks so much. What are your pronouns?"
No, didn't you see the other day that the Chinese announced the Uyghurs, now that the Chinese have intervened, are living happier, more fulfilling lives?
Yeah, I saw that. I love the part where they finally got locked out.
Chinese soldiers.
Yeah, they finally got locked out of their Twitter account and they get all pissed about it. That was really funny.
Well, now that they can actually challenge that narrative, because, well, we all know why. They're actually kind of, I want to say stepping up, but I mean, they're not. They're just, flexing a little bit.
I actually, you know what? I think it's kind of interesting when we start talking about like the social media blockouts. They're starting to go after the left. And I think that's because the left has outrun its usefulness.
No, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at the prosecutions that are actually happening now in Portland and in Seattle.
Oh, did you see? Did you not see that yesterday? Did you see that? I thought that was fucking amazing. Did you see that tweet about the change in policy in fucking Portland and Seattle?
No.
Oh, yeah, they're going to start using this interesting new tool they've discovered. I believe it's the law.
Yeah, they're going to start enforcing the fucking law as a rule change. People who commit a crime in front of a cop are now going to be arrested. How fucking bizarre, huh?
I don't know if this radical policing agenda can work. I think we really need some sort of police reform. I don't know if that is really the reform.
I love that too.
Let's be entirely honest. The reason that these companies, these software companies, have basically allowed the left to run free and basically made the argument publicly that the country is failing because of Trump is probably due to the fact that Trump put a restriction on the number of H-1B visas. Right? That's really what we're seeing here is now all of a sudden all the H-1B visas are coming back. They're going to be able to recruit a whole bunch of people from the third world, put them into slave wage situations and slave wage working conditions, basically own people in modern day slavery, and kick out all of the properly paid and, protected American workforce because now Biden's in charge and that's his plan
you forgot the important part. Have them train their replacements.
Yep.
Because that's a thing. That's absolutely a thing because they will deny you like the last of your benefits if you won't train your replacement. In some cases.
When I was, I'm very glad that I don't work for an industry that has any ties to H-1B visas, right? But when I was looking for a job in 2014, 2012 to 2014, right after I graduated, it was stunning what you would see in job descriptions, and you could tell the H-1B visa postings from the others because they would basically have PhD level shit in entry level positions, and that's because they could take an individual from India or China or Pakistan or wherever the fuck they were grabbing them from in something that would cost a $60,000 to $70,000 bachelor's degree from a United States institution. They could take somebody who had a PhD or equivalent and put them into a role for $30,000 to $40,000. And that is exactly what it was. It was basically, it is borderline slavery for these people. They can't afford to live in the United States, but it doesn't matter because it's better than where they came from. Because ultimately, it's always better to live in a fucking shitty-ass apartment with 3 roommates than it is a shanty town.
And this is without even getting into the low-key almost slavery of the dangling of the ICE call over somebody's head. It's like, do you really want to speak up about the problems here at work? I mean, we can always call ICE and see what they think about your work situation.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's the other side of that. Well, not really so much a side, so much as a similar situation here. If you have the people who are coming in and doing their jobs under the table, you have the illegal immigrants that cross the border and stay in, or they're just I guess the quote undocumented people.
Or your
'Cause I
seasonal
guess
worker types. This
well,
legitimately does happen to seasonal workers a
so
lot. Like
so
this
a lot of people
description
end up
I gave.
being employed illegally for lower than minimum wage, and they're told basically if you go to the authorities and try to get us dinged for this, then they're gonna send you back over the border,
Mm-hmm.
which may or may not be true. But it's certainly a big enough risk, especially if you're multi-generational, without having legal status in the country. You're not when they say we're gonna send you back to where you've been here the entire time. I kind of get it at that point, because technically at that point you're also a citizen, but you can't really get any benefits because then your parents have to be kind of shown to not be citizens.
Yeah,
So
I mean, it is a legitimately complicated situation, and there is not a good answer to the DACA situation.
Or a simple one. You can't have any president who offers you a simple solution to any immigration issue is just
They're
lying
being
outright.
Yep.
at best, intellectually dishonest.
Well, I think that we can safely say is every president. To be fair.
Fair, yeah.
I mean, it's tough. The best solution is we have to control the wage reduction of the workforce, right? We have to deal with that.
Right now, they're going about it with the solution to pollution is dilution, which is unfortunate.
Oh, I don't think that's what they're going for. I think they're going with, hey, my buddies helped me get elected, and let's give them lower wage labor.
Oh yeah, gotta roll out the favors.
Is that they've managed to increase the minimum wage, but simultaneously decrease the actual minimum wage, because they've priced people out of being able to work. That's what happens when you increase the minimum wage. You've literally priced people out of being able to work full time, let alone work at all.
That goes back to Biden's had a whopping 3 days in office and has somehow managed to murder 900,000 jobs.
So as a good example, look at what happened under Obamacare. You had a bunch of people who are working 40-hour work weeks who had their hours reduced to 39.5 hours. Why did that happen? So that they could be not claimed as a full-time worker, and therefore not get the full benefits under, quote, Obamacare. And that was not something that was illegal to do, because if you're paying someone to do stuff, it's up to you to determine how many hours you're going to pay them for. You couldn't take that away from a business in one fell swoop. They needed to make Obamacare happen. So Biden care might make shit like that illegal, which is just one more way the government's going to tell you how to run your fucking business.
Yep.
And your life, for that matter.
And your life.
So
I mean, the thing is, the people farther on the left have gotten really upset with Biden because he's not going to do Medicare for all. So he's said so far, and it's probably not going to happen under Biden.
No, I mean, there's a couple things. There's a couple things that he has said that everybody keeps on hoping for. I really hope that you and Evan are going to pay for my student loans, but I also know that Biden's been pretty clear.
The thing is, it's not just going to be us paying for your student loan; it's also going to be you.
Yeah, but I mean, realistically, I gain the majority of the benefit compared to you guys.
Still, you see, the other side of that as a problem is that as it increases our debt overall, we're going to continue with inflation to minimize the debt. So the money is not going to just come out of the taxpayers' pockets. If you're in the lower 50% and you're not paying taxes, you're either a student or you're just a NEET, or you're just stuck at home. If you have cash in your pocket, it is decreasing in value as you speak, because that's the only way that we end up paying off a national debt the size that we have. You can see the same thing that happened with England. Their national debt after World War II was like 280% of their GDP. They finished paying that off in 2006. And the way they finished paying that off was through all the inflation that happened from fucking 1945 to 2006. Without all that inflation, they would have paid, I think it was 95% more than they paid. It is some ridiculous ratio they ended up getting out of it. So
well, that's one of the things, right? So
Like,
we talked
but
about
that's how
this
the
with
nation will pay
Bitcoin.
the debt off. All that debt that they're going to be paying off using inflation comes out of your pocket by making the dollar worth less to you.
Yep.
So if you hold dollars during rapid inflation, your money actively is being taxed in this manner.
And we've talked about this a little bit with Bitcoin in the past,
yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Like the fact that Bitcoin's skyrocketing. And fundamentally, as much as both Craig and I are on the same side, that we believe that Bitcoin is going to crash,
Sure.
right?
It's probably getting support out of inflation right now.
One of the largest, that's one of the largest things that is kind of a question for us is how far is it actually going to crash, given the fact that it's actually being supported by rampant inflation this year.
And
Now,
so
that being said, everybody in the middle class is about to get fucked royally.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
So here's the funny thing. In the middle of that, Biden's going to have a golden opportunity with the recovery that's going to come out of this pandemic. Regardless of when it happens, it's probably going to happen under his 4 years if he makes it to wherever time this happens. But at some point here, the pandemic's going to dry up to the point where people are going to be able to just either go back to work or demand to go back to work, what have you. They're going to find a way to get to jobs again. And jobs are going to explode. We're going to have like a banger year. And the only way that that's not going to happen is if there's purposeful government intervention to fuck it up.
Which is a real possibility.
The market forces are so aligned in the right direction. In the next couple of years here, we're going to have a major economic boom that the only way you can make that not happen is to purposefully go in and fuck it up for everyone.
Yep.
And that can only happen in a top-down decision.
Don't be surprised.
Yeah, if it happens, it's going to happen. It's going to be spectacular because everyone's going to be like, but our predictions. Like, yeah, well, but
yeah, what about those predictions for 2016 and 18 and 20 and everything? Yeah, it's almost like somebody else is making the decision for you, even though these things shouldn't happen. Isn't that
so? Anyway, there's going to be this. There's going to be an economic boom, and inflation is thankfully going to for less of an issue during that time.
I don't know if there's going to be an
there's too many. There's too many people that want to work but can't work right now for it to not happen. The market forces are all lined up in the right direction.
I agree with you, but at the same time, again, Biden has successfully killed 900,000 jobs in less than 3 days.
Like I said, it's not going to happen if someone like Biden steps in and fucks it up on purpose.
Which, as I say,
or hell,
don't be surprised.
For him, I'll give him even the benefit of the doubt on this. He could completely fuck it up by accident. But if it's going to be a fuck up, it's going to come from someone like him. It will not be. It will not be a ground up thing.
And I do.
Oh no, absolutely
agree,
not.
Right?
From
like
the ground up, it will be made to work. It's ready to go.
Like if you look at 1967, the Hong Kong flu, huge bounce back 2 years later. If you go back to even the Spanish flu, huge bounce back a couple years later. Every time we have one of these major events, like a pandemic, what have you, the market forces are so pressed to go back to the mean that you have to try to fuck it up for it to not happen.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, you take a look at where we were last January, and we're not much. We weren't much further above where we are today. Obviously, we have inflation in between then and now.
Sure.
But you take a look at where we were in January, and that was one of the first good years that we've had in about a decade.
Sure.
Right. Like, and we
were at record output and improvement, and then we got record destruction.
Yes.
And then we're record recovery.
The reality is that we went from, I mean, what a lot of people don't understand when you'll see the Dems and they'll sit there and talk about how Obama managed to recover the economy.
Right.
He was perpetually, the amount of jobs that were lost in 2008 to 2009, which is not his fault, right, was huge. But because of the way he decided to step in, he stepped in as a president that would be like, if we had a banger economy, maybe his stuff wouldn't have been that devastating, but he basically started from day one with massive amounts of rules and regulations, massive amounts of tax and debts. So what ended the consequences of Obama's economy were not that he started off from a shitty position, but he basically made it shitty in perpetuity, where he wasn't ever actually growing beyond the base replacement in our society, right? Because there was always that was one of the problems he had. So when we started talking about Trump, it took Trump a couple of years to kind of like get his. He cut a whole bunch of regs out of the way. He cut a whole bunch of taxes out of the way. He started implementing a lot of these growth and reform policies. He deterred immigration. So that put the economy in a position for the first time in a decade that it was ready to take off, and it just started to in 2019. 2020 would have been amazing if it weren't for Democratic governors shutting down their own economies, specifically to harm Trump during the election process.
And the funny thing is, you had retards like Horseface come out and say it out loud.
You got to be very clear which Horseface you're talking about.
Right, so of the 4 Horsefaces of the apocalypse, it was the one with the larger teeth. I know, not specific enough. It was the one that wasn't bald and was really annoying, and also wore glasses on occasion.
Are we talking about the individual who generally represents themselves with 3 letters or less?
Well, it also wasn't Rashida Tlaib, who was just fat and annoying.
Okay. So we're talking about the squad. We've narrowed it down a little bit. So this has to be my one of the representatives that's from a little bit south of me, not my representative.
Although the representative of someone I know who absolutely fucking hates that it's true.
The individual who would win if there was a glass of water in her district with the letter D on it. Is that the individual we're talking about here?
I have a quick...
Go ahead.
Well, no, I was going to update an earlier story that we had a couple weeks ago, and I think it ties in nicely. It would appear that Ben Shapiro did not steal AOC's shoes. That has been confirmed.
He did not order the stealing of her shoes.
Those shoes were not stolen by Ben Shapiro. He did not get a sniff.
But you know what? I'm sure Biden got his sniff.
I'm sure he did. You know what? Actually, that's the funny thing about COVID. It's the one thing that's devastating to him is not getting your sense of smell back.
Oh, indeed.
Hey, you know what? I think we can all appreciate that on the day that the conservatives stormed the Capitol, Biden was probably right in front sniffing all the ladies' chairs.
It's possible. I mean, it really is.
Oh, that's so fucking
Either that or he
up.
was in a bunker, with just one of his backup chairs for sniffing.
That's so fucking awful, and that's so fucked up.
But there weren't a lot of people there. He had the time. Yeah.
Yeah, you never know.
He was sniffing their chairs.
And he was certainly protected.
I'm sure there's some golden showers going on there.
That's just
could
wrong.
Could be.
My favorite out of that also, as far as the response to it from the Congress critters, was not just that like they all cowered under their fucking seats, but that Ayanna Pressley was apparently so disturbed by the possibility that the people in her office not wearing masks could infect her purposefully and that they were not going to protect her, that she decided to walk out of her office, back into the arms of all the people who hated her apparently that were there to kill her. It's like if you weren't actually scared if you did that. You just were not.
No, and I mean,
you know what? A person who's like that, I would not say this normally of actually, I'll say this normally of other people. I think that without any actual harm coming to them, they deserve, especially with that kind of action, to learn what it means to be so scared that you're actually scared, not just scared to put on paper.
Well, that falls back to the kind of thing of where a person hasn't got any experience in their life, and they make statements and claims that are well outside of their understanding.
One of the things that's really irritating is, and again, this comes from Tim Pool. He's like, "Oh my God, this was such a significant event." Bullshit. I absolutely agree that it is. We should the cop who died, the protesters who died, all of that stuff's terrible, right? And that's a universal thing. That was terrible. The Black Lives Matter protests, whoever died during that, there was 30 some odd people who died during Black Lives Matter.
It's more than that now, yeah, 40 some odd.
Well, I stopped counting after 30. Yeah. Sorry. I ran out of fingers and toes, and after I run out of fingers and toes, it's like you get a 50% margin, and then I stopped giving a shit.
Look, you would have run out of fingers and toes on you and your wife.
I ran out of fingers. Yes, I did run out of fingers.
You had to start counting on your dog at that point.
Well, that would have been weird.
That would have been weird.
Although actually, one of my cats is polydactyl, so I probably would have had a couple extra spare fingers.
Oh yeah, you could have gotten yourself to like a solid, could have gotten yourself up there like a solid, What'd
Well,
you get?
but
Like maybe,
I mean,
maybe a
Well, if
62
you're getting up
or
to
so.
counting your
I
pet's
think
toes,
I
that's
stopped counting
kind
in
of
July, and by the end
Yeah,
of
it
July,
got
it
up.
was like 32.
It's in the 40s.
Is it in the 40s?
Yeah, it's in the 40s.
Wow, that's crazy.
that's
But
really
I mean,
impressive.
the point is like, regardless, as much as I am not a supporter of the Black Lives Matter protests, because they were burning down their cities. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether it was a protester who was killed or a police enforcement official who was killed. People shouldn't die during this shit, right? If you can't manage to control your shit and people die during it, that's a problem, right?
Yeah.
So and that holds true for the Capitol protest. It holds true for the Black Lives Matter protest. But let's be entirely honest. This is not like we didn't have a whole bunch of armed people hoping to hold the Capitol and be like, "Ha ha, Washington State, you now serve we the QAnons." Like
Oh my God.
that's not what happened.
Dude,
This
the
wasn't an
QAnon shit is so-
insurrection. This wasn't a riot. It was a whole bunch of people who were fucking dazed and confused because they weren't really aware of the rules going in.
Well, not only
Dude,
that
also-
too, there were a lot of I don't want to say for sure there were instigators because we only know there was that one James Sullivan guy. But
Also, did you guys see the QLARP finally went ahead and got a detailed expose on fortunes?
Are you talking about the one where they sat there and said that it was basically a couple people who are milking the
A few
boomers
mods.
for all they were worth?
Yeah.
I mean, does anybody expect anything different? I wish I'd thought
No.
of it.
No,
Yeah,
it
no,
was
I mean,
the funniest. It
all
started
said,
off
it
as a
is,
LARP.
there is a good grift in there, and there's a lot
Yes.
of good information that got out that people
Here's the
wouldn't
thing,
have ever
it
learned.
started
but-
off as a LARP, and it started off as a LARP. The one guy tried to do it like 6 months before it really took off, and he tried to do it as like a different thing. And then someone did a decent LARP on I guess Poll, and then the same mod saw that shit and stole it, combined it with their previous LARP by changing some of the details. They were no longer a person in such and such agency or whatever the fuck they are now. This other person didn't matter because it's the same premise, same exact kind of grift bullshit. And then it was a big joke on Poll, but somehow the boomers got wind of it and it took off. And then they just rode with it. And then there was that one that bitch that came in and decided to just kind of make it about her and get money out of it. And of course, that all worked out perfectly for them. It's just that at this point, there are so many of those people who are just like disillusioned and legitimately, I hate to use the word for this, need to be deprogrammed from the fucking Q psychosis.
Yeah, I mean,
Like,
really, these people.
I wouldn't even say like
they
deprogrammed.
kinda
They
have
just need to be
the,
like left alone.
They
They
have
only
kind
need,
of
like, left
symptoms
alone
of
for a year.
like being a member of a cult. I mean, in all honesty.
Yeah. And like it's only a handful of people that were really like this, but like they just need to be like left alone for a year to work through the cogdis and accept that maybe they were going batshit fucking wackaloon.
Yeah, and the worst part
Well,
about this
I
is
gotta
there was
wonder.
a lot of
I gotta
good
wonder when
info
this
there.
shit pops up, right? Like, what is it that makes you think that it is true, right?
Well, that's the thing. I don't think
Like,
they.
I
I
mean,
don't think they worry about that part. I think that's what the problem is.
That part actually kind of handles itself. I mean,
I
there
think
is
that
in a lot of
comes
people a latent desire to have faith in something,
So
and
so
in a world
so
that's
that's
kind
the
of
thing.
broken and without it, what else are you
So
gonna do?
the faith is the for lack of a better word here, the truthiness of it for them. I think that's what it comes down to. I mean, it almost
Maybe, but I mean, like,
I'll say
I'm
it almost
talking.
has to be, but it's the same bullshit.
I'm talking even bigger picture than that, right? Like there are certain boundaries to my
you get
belief
caught up-
system, my world
Yeah.
construct, right? Which I know is on the fringe of what I
Right.
consider acceptable,
So-
right? Like, and I'll give you an example from something that happened tonight, right? When it comes to the vaccine stuff, there's a whole lot of me that really wants to believe medical professionals and all the
Sure.
scientists and all the other stuff. But I also have, as a reticence, a tremendous amount of skepticism for biopharmaceutical companies.
Sure.
And I really have a reticence when all of a sudden the United States government basically abandons any sense of
I'm gonna
safety
grab a quick coffee.
protocols for something that doesn't seem to be really that scary,
So,
right?
I think
So
another...
I will admit, on one hand, part of me thinks there and goes, am I really out to lunch every single time I talk about these vaccines? On the other hand, I have something that I can point to that says there is a consistent, terrible history of people actively fucking it up for profit, right?
So
I have that.
here's where I'll go on this. And there's another example you can go with, and it involves a discrepancy between two different ways of you can just say indoctrination. So in the same way that propaganda used to be an unbiased term, where you could say, give me some of the company propaganda, meaning company literature, brochures, etc.
Yep.
Indoctrination in this sense is just in the sense of teaching. So if you have two people who are religious and pick whatever sect of whatever religion you wish, and we'll just go with Christianity because it's an easy one and it has a pretty broad tent. You have the difference between someone who's brought up, from being young, going to Sunday services, etc., and they went through Bible study when they were younger. They might not be like hyper religious now, but they kind of go, yeah, I kind of believe in God or whatever. They know all the words to say. And then you have a person who, was a crack addict until 30, and then they had someone walk up to him and say, do you believe in absolute truth? That little one-liner opener.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
So what they do is they start off with, do you believe in absolute truth? You say, well, I guess there is a truth to the universe. And they say, well, what if I told you it came in a book? Blah, blah, blah. And you say, what do you mean?
This is a strange reality that you live in here.
No, this is a real thing that happens. People actually fall for that line.
Yeah, I've not personally heard it, but I'm actually familiar with this.
Really?
Shtick, I guess you could call it.
They say, they start off with, do you believe in absolute truth? We're talking about like Jehovah's Witness level craziness here.
Okay.
So, but they'll come to you and they'll try this as a way of working in on a logic basis through their apologism, which again here in this sense is in terms of like the argumentation style, not like say someone's being sorry. So apologetics, Christian apologetics is a whole thing in itself, and so it's interesting in its own right. But there's a difference between someone who's like been kind of inundated it for their entire life, and then someone who just kind of gets hooked on it right there, and not even necessarily in a vulnerable moment. So if you look at the difference between these two kinds of instances here, you have kind of the same, I would say, similar mentality to people who need this kind of extra structure in their life, and it's just presented to them in such an appetizing way. The QAnon thing, it meant that you were kind of like on the inside, you got to be in the know, and yeah, there was a plan to all this craziness. It's all planned, therefore there's structure, and if there's structure, I can be comfortable. So that's the kind of mentality I see that really coming through with, is that there's this need for structure in life, and that's what's really that's the need that's being filled.
And maybe that's the case, but
Again,
I guess what it comes down to is formal training is always to look for the negative spacing.
Sure.
Right? Like, that's really what we get trained for, right?
Yeah.
When you start talking about engineers, the test that you'll get is this viable, yes or no? And it'll sit there and have you, it won't even be that complicated of mathematics. It's literally they give you a couple presentation of things, and you're basically supposed to say, yeah, that violates this rule or that law of physics, therefore it's not true.
It's like a lot of them come down to like second law violations.
Yeah, things like that. So you're supposed to look for the information that's not presented, right? And that's a significant portion of our training too. Is can you solve this problem? The answer is no, because we have X number of equations
are available.
Right, exactly. So you start talking about something like the QAnon. And the QAnon, to me, it seems like an obvious, there's no way I would ever possibly believe it.
Well,
and that's not because like any one thing that they say is inherently crazy. It's because there's so many degrees of freedom in everything that they say that it could be true.
Trust the plan's kind of...
It's a little culty out there. It's a little culty. I mean, if we're being honest here.
It's the way that it was used in literally as an analogy to or corollary to trust God's plan. Like, that just screamed problem to me. I'm saying this as a religious Jew, mind you. Like, but like in my faith, there's
See,
room
I
for
would
doubting.
consider you more of like a god slayer than a religious individual, right? Like,
There's room for doubt in the religion. What do you think the whole Talmud is?
You know what I mean? Well, I don't know. I can't even begin to delve into my own religious ideals. They're complicated.
Well, yours involves like space aliens and shit and
What?
witchcraft and the occult. And I'm just giving you a hard time because I
Aliens
can.
have nothing to do with the occult.
Look, you will respect Lord Zeno, or you will be programmed in Clearwater, Florida.
God damn it!
Listen,
Aliens don't have anything to do with the occult.
my-
One sits there and deals with psychic magic, and the other one deals with nanoprobes.
With psychic magic.
That's exactly right.
How did the nanoprobes get in there? They were moved in with mind powers. How? Well, any sufficiently advanced technology. Fuck you.
You know, I've actually so I've been looking to sit there and start a tabletop role playing game.
Yeah.
And I was gonna go with Pathfinder, but it's really tough because I left with 3.5 edition D&D, which was so long ago. They got 2 other editions since that edition, and none of them have any good psionics. And I love psionics.
Yeah, psionics are actually fun. I really like how it's handled in 3.5. It's good. At the end of 3.0, right before they went into the proper 3.5, that was kind of cool and different.
Yeah.
See, like, I didn't do D&D, so I'd actually be the perfect person to just make up a new one whole cloth. You know, until a D&D person came and tried to play it, because then everything would be a fucking comparison to D&D.
Well, no, I mean, it's not that, right? Like, D&D is a pretty flexible system, and when
I know.
about...
Well, I guess if we should be honest here, we should say the original D25 SRD.
Yeah, that's probably true. So when we start talking about something like 3.5, 3.5 was literally everything that you could do in a fantasy setting. Like, every possible concept killed to death.
So what I would liken the framework to, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but well, actually, neither of you guys are good enough at programming, I guess. So you understand, like, C++ is a very extensible programming language.
Mm-hmm.
So I would liken, like, the D&D rule set as being kind of like the core keyword set in C++, where you have this wide, extensible feature space that you have available to design a tabletop game in, underneath a certain set of rules.
Oh, sure enough, yeah. And you've got
more or less...
And you've got a lot of modules that work really well together too, which kind of ties in programming.
That works directly analogously then.
So to understand it, right, when we start talking about D&D 1.0 was with Gary Gygax and the rest of the crew, and those motherfuckers were all like hardcore nerds. So they really wanted to bust out their calculators, and they were just one step away from calculus, probably because they had their one retard friend that they wanted to actually sit there and play the party with, right? Like,
but
you rounded out the whole thing, right? So D&D version 1 and D&D first edition and D&D second edition, which I played, both were
D&D
incredibly...
is a different thing, if we're being completely honest. That was like a tabletop thing. So the first AD&D is what you mean to say.
Yeah, I guess that's true. AD&D. Sure, you want to play that specific.
I mean,
so in any case,
I actually have played the original one, so that was back in the day. I know I'm dating myself with that one.
Insane mathematical computations into whether or not you could actually hit somebody or not.
Oh yeah, tables on tables.
There was tables upon tables. Yeah,
you had log tables. You got out your slide rule.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. So 3.0 was basically saying, no, this is retarded. Why are we doing all this math? We don't want to do math. We just want to play games, right? And 3.0 fixed a lot of the insane, like,
it standardized a lot of these really bespoke and unique things.
Right? So when we want to talk about it from, like, a maths perspective, think of it as, like, imagine that you had one gaming system that decided to talk about I. Right? It's an imaginary number. It doesn't exist, but it's the square root of -1, and it's critical to making everything work. And that was pretty much first and second edition D&D, right? And then you get to third edition D&D, and they're like, no. we're not going to do this square root of -1 bullshit.
We're
This
doing
is going to be
integers.
everything has a positive integer value.
Yeah.
And it was a huge improvement
Oh,
because
yeah.
then I didn't have to sit there and be like, oh my god, give me a calculator. I have to spend some time sitting there and figuring out whether I can hit AC0. Right? It's all positive integer values. 3.5 fleshed that system out. It made the whole rule set a little bit better.
And
then
standardized everything.
It standardized everything. And then D&D went one way, which was to 4th edition, because 3.5 had been so successful that every element of every fantasy game had already been brought into existence. And it hadn't been done in a playtest and balanced way, so you had characters like Pun Pun, which by 3rd level or so could technically make himself a god. And it's very impressive.
Yeah, there were things you could do in that system that legitimately worked in that system to kind of break it. So
yeah,
but I mean, the world isn't a balanced place, so
right.
It actually was a pretty good way to represent any story you wanted to tell.
It really was. So they went to 4th edition, and they went to 4th edition because WoW had been so successful. So this was like 2008, 2009 timeframe. They went to 4th edition, and they basically turned everything into a cookie cutter class.
Yeah, they basically tried to make this. They tried to make a tabletop role playing game into a WoW clone.
It was gross. It was like disgusting. Every single character class was exactly the same, like exactly the same.
And that's
so
when
they turned around.
That's when I dipped out.
And that was so. What ended up happening there was the people who got pissed off basically said, well, we really wanted to fix a lot of these problems in 3.5. So things like, I would run out, if I was a spellcaster, I would run out of spells, and so I'd have to go walk up with my staff and hit them on the head, right? So 1st edition, I would cast one spell at level 1, and then I'm done. For the next, week or two, or for the next day, 24-hour cycle, I would have 0 spells as a wizard, and I'd have to go beat people with my staff to do any damage or help anybody, and I was completely useless. Right? So D&D 2.0 fixed that so I had 3 spells that I could cast before I became completely useless by the end of the day. And 3.0 sat there and made it 4 or 5 spells, and I had a couple other options that I could do. And then 3.5 fleshed that out a little bit more, so there were some other support roles that I could have. But what people were really looking for is allowing, all of the classes to kind of participate throughout the battle rather than being one-shot cannons. And that was what people wanted at 3.5. So they made 4.0, where everybody did the exact same thing every single round. So the cleric could cast a 3d6 damage spell, or the wizard could cast a 3d6 damage spell, or the fighter could use a 3d6 damage feat. It was literally the exact same, regardless of which class you used. Everybody had the same abilities. Yeah, it was terrible.
Yeah,
Nobody
from
wanted to
everything
play
I heard about it, it really seemed like it was. It completely turned me off of gaming.
It sounds like there's absolutely no reason to pick a class.
There really wasn't. There was one class that was different. It was the Fey Touched Warlock, and it is that specific. You couldn't be an elemental warlock because then you were just like everybody else. But the Fey Touched allowed it so that every single time that you cast a spell, you teleported. That's the only one that was different in all of the classes. Right, so what ended up happening was so Pathfinder diverged off that when they went to that system in D&D, and Pathfinder basically was 3.75. And so 3.75 was essentially introducing some refinements that allowed things like spellcasters to be effective after they'd already expended their big kahuna slots, right? So they could do their canon thing, and then they could sit there and go back and do whatever they needed to do.
To make your anime reference here, they could do their Kamehameha, but then they've got, a couple of little missiles and, punches and cool shit they can do.
Right. So instead of your wizard who has 0 armor and no physical strength requiring to grab his staff and walk to the front lines alongside the fighter after he expended his spells, there was always something that you could tap in and go, okay, you do a little bit of damage from the back, right? It added those abilities, and that was Pathfinder. And so now they've put out Pathfinder 2, and D&D's on to edition number 5 because edition number 4 was cancer.
Yeah, from what I understand,
So-
5 is fairly okay, and I've heard Pathfinder 2 is fine. I never actually got a chance to play Pathfinder. I just kind of got out of everything when D&D 4 happened.
I was in the same boat. I'm just looking to start getting back into it.
Perfect
And
timing.
so, yeah. But it looks like Pathfinder 2 is pretty good. So they're kind of fix. It looks like they fix a lot of the problems with D&D 3 and 3.5. Things like sitting there and dealing with the rest period a little bit better. So like what happens when you're not in combat? That's in the majority of technically your game time.
Yeah, fair.
And it allows you to actually craft items. Poison is going to be an actual thing. Those
Well, you
kinds
can
of
do
things are
that
useful.
well, you could do that in 3.5, but then, in 4, that was another one of the big complaints about 4 was there wasn't any kind of item crafting. It's like, okay, well,
No.
how do these things get made that we find in the dungeon?
Right. Well, I mean, and even in 3.5, right? Like it was still you'd have to basically spend your experience points.
Well,
So
there were other ways of getting it done, but yeah.
I mean, and to give folks an idea, right? So D&D 1, right? D&D 1 just said that D&D 1 was bigotry, right? So there was your retards, right? And they just couldn't do anything, but you might as well throw them in a full suit of armor with the sword. And that's what happened to the people who rolled poorly. They ended up as fighters.
Yeah.
Anybody who rolled better than the fighters had a chance at being like a cleric or a druid or something like that. The people who rolled stupendously well went to be monks, who were virtual gods of the game. And if you rolled really, really, really well, you were a psionicist, at which point you basically made everything explode. Not at like level 1. You just made everything explode with your mind.
Yeah. Yeah,
There's
they were
no limits on it.
Yeah, the psionicists in the original game were completely overpowered and ridiculous.
It was pretty bad. And then second edition, they basically said, well, nobody really likes the fact that you have a 1 in 100 chance at the beginning of your campaign of being a psionicist because A, everybody feels bad when you don't get to be one, and B, everybody feels pretty terrible when you do get to be one.
Yes, this is true.
Like
Kind of
like
changes the dynamic.
it really does. Because now your dragon is very squishy all of a sudden.
Yeah, all your storytelling changes when one of your characters turns into a minor god.
Yeah, that's kind of what happened.
So
I'm starting to get back into it.
We've gotten
But,
out on a real far tangent here, so let's kind
Yeah,
of
we
wrap
have.
up with the D&D stuff so we can close it out for the night too.
I was gonna say we actually started this one early so we could stop early.
We did. That was the goal.
Yeah, you've got early stuff to do, so
I've got
I
early
do.
stuff to
I
do,
do.
too.
I have one of those things that is preventing, ships from going out to sea, supposedly.
Oh, fix that, you fucker!
yeah, come on, geez.
It's really not, though. It's really not. The Esh
My
organization.
My
has
tax dollars
determined
are
that's
paying
what's
for your
happening.
ass. God damn it!
You're right. Your tax dollars are paying for Esh to come in and do Esh things, which is basically sit there and whine and piss and moan and cause problems.
I mean, you should fix those problems. That sound important.
Yeah. They're important enough. That's my morning tomorrow.
That sounds fun.
Good luck with that one. But
Oh, it's gonna be a
anyway,
blast.
finishing out on this, I can't personally comment on any of the current role-playing systems. I'm actually myself looking to maybe start up something with a D20 modern setting, and that hasn't even been recreated. So it would have to be run in the initial in the
I have
3.25
so
kind of
I'm
thing it is.
doing Pathfinder 2nd edition, and then I'm going to tie it into Starfinder because I've got a whole premise of the campaign where, and it literally, so we actually talked about this, which is that any technology sufficiently advanced is indistinguishable from magic. That's actually going to be the running theme of the campaign.
Oh, so kind of like Arcanum.
It might be, yeah.
That was a fun game.
The idea is,
Yes, it was.
and nobody listens to this podcast, which really helps me out. So the idea is that civilization collapsed, so they're actually going to play as futuristic characters for half the campaign,
Oh,
they're
it's,
gonna
it's
play
like
as
steampunk, except not gay.
yeah. So they're gonna play as futuristic characters through the collapse of civilization, and then their other characters, which are technically fantasy characters, are gonna be played like 10,000 years in advance, and it's gonna be based off the idea that the vestigial parts and remnants of civilization, once we got to a certain level of evolution, we basically destroyed ourselves and sent ourselves all the way back to, medieval Europe. It'll be interesting.
So people will be shitting their pants, but also pining for cell phones.
That's true. Well, I mean, they won't know cell phones exist.
Okay.
Well, until they find one. But
it'll be a mythological thing.
Well, I don't really have anything else I've got to go over other than on the cell phone note. Let's touch on that one last time. Go ahead and find yourself a good non-Apple Android rootable phone, and just be careful with what you do when you're out there, when you're online, and when you're doing everything, because the world is a little different today than it was.
Here's the thing.
Not even that many days ago.
If you got the money to play around with one, go out there and find yourself either a good used one or a decent one that's new for like $100, and get it and just dick. You don't even have to get cell phone service, just to dick around with it and see what you can do without using any Google products on it, and you'll discover a whole entire a whole multi-level ecosystem built entirely around the idea of not only personal security and say freedom on that level, but just like the complete rejection of these larger tech companies intruding into your life.
But be careful when you do.
Be careful when you do, and
your recommendations go to XDA developers and research extensively. Some builds are far more stable than other builds.
Sure.
And as with anything, your mileage may vary, and do your research.
Yeah.
And if you're gonna put any of this stuff onto a computer that's associated with this phone, if you have the resources to do this, only get yourself like a refurbished laptop, like off of Dell auction for a couple $100, and don't interact with anything else.
Yep.
Don't use a thumb drive from if you're gonna use a thumb drive to put stuff on that. Do anything you're gonna do in that regard before you've installed anything or run anything, so you don't get any viruses. And then just anytime you need to put something onto it, buy yourself another, $5 or $10 USB key from the store, and then throw it in the garbage when you're done. So just to maintain one-way communication between a computer you trust and a computer you might not trust so much, as the software can go screwy. It's likely not to be the case, but just in case, you don't want to put ransomware on there or anything.
Absolutely.
I mean,
and that's
you have to be diving
pretty
deep into the web to find ransomware nowadays.
It's still out there kind of by accident sometimes.
And
maybe,
also
but
in an area where you need to consider security, it is a larger risk because you are a target.
I'm keeping this lower tech right now just for sake of simplicity, but for me personally, I would do a lot of this stuff on a VM, just because it's easier to do it on a VM and delete it when I'm done.
So VM, by the way, VM is a virtual machine. It's basically he's running a pretend instance of the computer that he's actually running.
Yeah.
And then once he's done, it goes away and it never existed.
Yeah. If you watch any of these scam bait channels on YouTube, like I got the scammer and got into his computer, this is how they do it.
Yeah, I love
setting
those things up is great.
Of a machine that's not even a real thing. It's just a virtual instance on their own machine.
Right.
And they invite this person into their spider web.
So VirtualBox is a free and open source software. You can run Linux distros readily and easily on those. If you have the hardware to do it, VMs are a great way to do it. But again, in the same vein, because it was cheap and easy for me to do. So, for instance, I went and and so this comes down to the security issue. I had a conference in Cancun, so I was there on business for doing academic work, and I did a presentation there. I have a laptop, a small laptop that I brought with me that I bought specifically for that excursion because I hadn't done an international conference at the time previously, and I'm poor grad student, so I had made some money doing something, And I was like, okay, I'm going to be going there anyway. I may as well go ahead and get myself the dedicated hardware. Had any issue come up with that hardware, I would have been able to just wipe it and not lose anything.
For those of
so
us
that
who are a little
laptop
bit
is-
more dedicated, we found ways of actually extracting viruses on our own.
Well, so anyway, so that laptop is now, like, that's the laptop I bring to the bathroom now. Just because if you don't squat and surf, you're not living.
Oh, fair enough. Fair enough.
Most of us have cell phones for that.
Well, yeah, but you see, I have my cell phone to do shower Twitter, and then and you get yourself one of those TV dinner tables.
Do
and
you
you can
still
sit it
shower
right in front-
Twitter?
Oh yeah.
Really? I don't Twitter anymore. I really don't. I was put off by the last purge.
So
That's reasonable. I'm still seeing people.
I'm trickling in on mines. Like I'm shit posting on there right now.
I tried to get mines going, but the downside to mines is the upside to mines is it has no algorithm. The downside to mines is it has no algorithm.
Right. Yeah.
So
actually,
you
the
get
suggested
zero
channels,
visibility to anybody.
So the suggested channels picked me up pretty well. I've actually found a lot of people that were on Twitter on there. A lot of the people I frequently talk to on Twitter.
Really?
Not like so. A lot of people also just haven't. It's platform adoption is an issue that Minds has always had. It's going to continue to have for years and years. But people are getting on there. You can find some of them on there now that you might find from Twitter.
Yeah, you can find the both of us there for sure.
Gab in the same way. Like I'm just not on
baggage,
Gab
though.
I'm not on Gab often enough, and it's so fucking slow right now. Like
it
the way
is. I mean,
the way
Gab
they're
is
getting
growing
hammered,
leaps and bounds right now. They really are.
like the way they're getting
Gab?
hammered on
Yeah.
from both ends. Yeah, they're growing like
Really?
crazy.
Oh yeah.
They're growing
Really?
like crazy, but they're also getting hampered on scale up.
They had so much baggage that they would never go anywhere.
Nope.
So
this
they're
purge
getting
and everything that happened with the election. No, they're doing amazing.
also-
They're doing gangbusters.
Are
They're
they?
also
Which
shit
is
posting
doing
on
better,
Twitter.
Mines or Gab?
Minds, hands down to me.
Mines is doing about what they're doing. I would say that Mines isn't taking on as many numbers as they are, but Gab is pulling on a lot more dedicated people.
Doing better. Gab is getting better growth at the moment, but they're also starting from a smaller position.
Yeah.
Better functionality, I would say Minds is better because Gab right now runs like fucking molasses because they're getting hammered from two different directions. They're having a hard time getting scale up to work because they don't have as many options for companies for hosting.
Yeah.
And they are trying to diversify their hosting. I know that, which is a good option. You should never just host on AWS, as Parler found out.
Yeah. And also register with Epic.
But they're also getting
GoDaddy.
this massive influx of people, so their service is really, really slow right now, except for their daily reset.
I thought that Gab had too much baggage as internet.
Well, I wouldn't recommend going on there if you're in a public position where you have these SJW types staring down at you. I wouldn't recommend getting on Gab publicly with your real name and so on necessarily because you're probably not going to there might be some frowning going on.
I mean, there is legitimately nothing there to be concerned with, but that doesn't change anything with the optics.
That doesn't change assholes from being
such
assholes.
a thing these days that you have to be concerned with it.
Yeah, and I
meant more in the lines of I figured that they would not pick up a lot of subscription because they had gotten branded early on as super far out there.
But you see, so that's 8chan got that branding. And then the only reason it's stuck is because the founder decided to go SJW for the bucks.
Did he really? Wheels went.
Oh yeah, he has completely changed direction. I mean, if we're being entirely honest, he's not even making a very good Christian, which he claims to be.
Really?
Yeah.
He went full. I was a teenage edgelord on that shit.
Yeah, he's
become
rather a disappointment.
Like I said, I've stopped kind of following the internet culture wars, and I know that 4chan basically purged most of their stuff. And from what I've seen, most of the original 4chan stuff that 4chan purged as part of their pitch to try to sell the servers has come back, right? 4chan has.
Oh yeah, because they couldn't sell it. It's all coming back.
Right.
So the 8chan replacement since that went down is 8kun, and I haven't really frequented that one at all. But as far as I understand, it's basically just the remnants that didn't just migrate back to 4chan.
Okay. Yeah, because I mean,
Which makes
Paul's
sense.
back on 4chan. I'm sure Baff is
Yeah.
probably still on 4chan.
Well,
No, Bath was never on 4chan. That one was.
Yeah. Well,
That was an 8chan only thing. And for people that are getting into what this crazy esoteric stuff we're talking about is, this is where
Baff was B.
Yeah, it's where some
Baff is
some
a
stuff
special
that's
place.
really borderline illegal kind of took on.
So
let's be very clear here. Baff is not like where things that are borderline illegal happen. Baff is where a whole bunch of people who want to be edgelords pretend to be edgelords. But, and here's a huge caveat, some 10 to 20% of their user base is actual legit edgelords, which stand on the very fucking edge of what is considered reasonable by the rest of society.
Yeah, the whole Ruins Life protocol, for example, is a legitimate way that you could fuck someone's day up. But should you ever do it because you would probably get caught and arrested? No. But people do actually use it, and they can use it quite successfully if they're able to hide themselves appropriately.
Yep.
It's just that, you don't do this shit because you don't do it. But some people do it, and
out there, as it were.
Some people do it and do things like get the FBI or a SWAT team to raid people's houses and shoot their dogs in front of them.
I remember back in the good old days where Baff's predominant form of assault on the wild cows was to order them a significant number of pizzas.
Oh yeah,
cash on delivery.
Unfortunately,
and then all of a sudden they started turning darker and darker, and I was like, okay.
They made cash on delivery not possible. That's what happened. You can blame the pizza guys for that. They made it. It's legitimately not a thing you can do anymore because of fucking people like the assholes on Bath.
Yeah, but some of it was pretty funny. It was really great when you'd see the folks on Twitter, right? The people who were all super social justice warrior or whatever. They'd show up and all
order pepperoni. That's meat.
Yeah, there was a time when trolling was much more innocent, and then everything got really dark. And it kind of stayed that way since.
So I think we've hit more than 3 hours now, or almost 3 hours.
Well, for the couple minutes, I'll have to cut out for because everything kind of died. Thanks, Discord. I'll
That's because
we've got a lot here.
They've targeted you.
Yeah, it was the NSA. They were sneaking in your interwebs.
That's what it is. I'm being gang stalked by Kiwi farmers. That's what it is.
I blame Steve as a federal employee. I think it's his fault.
Oh no, my microphone started to glow.
The reason that I associate with you guys is so that I keep my fingers on the terrorists.
See, the thing is, it wouldn't really surprise me if he was starting to glow, considering all of the radioactivity he has to be around on a daily basis.
Yeah, I mean, he is a nuclear tech.
Listen, I only pick up like 1 millirem. I think that's what my last year was.
It isn't even just the large potential for Judaism around that goy.
I only pick up my residual residual Jewish powers from you, my friend.
Yeah, you're just sitting there like, okay, come on, I've had babka once.
What is
but it's
babka?
fine. I've got a red man card because of my ancestry, so we're all good here.
Red man card.
Babka is like a dessert pastry. Like think like a sweetened roll of bread, but actually almost cake. Well, it's basically like a chocolate and vanilla swirl cake, but the swirl is axial.
Huh. Well, that actually sounds like fairly tasty.
I see.
It's pretty fucking good.
Well, anyway, as we've kind of rolled to the end of our topics for the week, everybody be careful out there. Take care of yourselves, and just be extra careful with everything you're doing online these days, because you're
ask us questions. We would be happy to mock your questions and maybe answer them.
Yeah. Hit us up on all our social media if there's anything you're interested in, you want to ask, or any topics you'd like us to discuss.
I'm the same guy on Minds, Gab, and Twitter. He'll put one of my links down below. I guess.
I'm at that fake guy Dan. Craig is at CraigBob99. Steve, are you on Minds?
I am at Ratman720. And if you find an @Ratman720, it's probably me.
Oh, there you go.
But regardless, you should email whoever it is and tell them to give me back my name.
Sure enough. All right. Take it easy, everybody. Talk to you again soon.